Kính thưa quý vị, chào mừng quý vị đến với Diễn đàn Bền Vững Việt Nam 2019 lần thứ 2 do Học viện Chính sách và Phát triển phối hợp cùng Hiệp hội Chuyên gia Toàn cầu AVSE Global ngày hôm nay. Thay mặt ban tổ chức, tôi nhiệt liệt chào mừng quý vị và sự kiện ngày hôm nay chúng tôi nhận được sự giúp đỡ phối hợp của các cơ quan bộ, ban ngành trung ương, địa phương, các tổ chức quốc tế với chủ đề thúc đẩy tăng trưởng kinh tế và xã hội toàn diện phục vụ phát triển bền vững. Diễn đàn Bền Vững Việt Nam 2019 mong muốn là nơi trao đổi và cập nhật những xu hướng, cách thức mới nhất đang diễn ra trên thế giới về tăng trưởng kinh tế và xã hội theo xu hướng bền vững. Để từ đó có thể xây dựng được một chiến lược hoạt động hiệu quả, đồng thời đề xuất giải pháp chính sách cho Đảng, Nhà nước và Chính phủ. Đây cũng là cơ hội để lắng nghe ý kiến của các chuyên gia hàng đầu thế giới về các lĩnh vực kinh tế, môi trường, giáo dục và xã hội, y học, năng lượng, v.v. góp phần thúc đẩy tăng trưởng kinh tế và xã hội toàn diện phục vụ phát triển bền vững. Kính thưa quý vị, tới dự diễn đàn ngày hôm nay, ban tổ chức xin trân trọng giới thiệu có sự hiện diện của ông Lê Quang Mạnh, Thứ trưởng Bộ Kế hoạch và Đầu tư. Xin chúng ta nhiệt liệt chào mừng. Bà Caitlin Wilson, đại diện thường trú của UNDP tại Việt Nam. Ông Jane Rylander, giám đốc chương trình rà soát đa chiều quốc gia của OECD. Đại diện ban tổ chức, tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu Phó giáo sư tiến sĩ Đào Văn Hùng, Giám đốc Học viện Chính sách và Phát triển Bộ Kế hoạch Đầu tư. Giáo sư Nguyễn Đức Khương, Phó Giám đốc phụ trách nghiên cứu và hợp tác khoa học quốc tế, Học viện Hành chính và Quản trị Kinh doanh Paris, Pháp, Chủ tịch AVSE Global. Ông Nguyễn Hoành Năm, Phó chủ nhiệm Ủy ban Nhà nước về người Việt Nam ở nước ngoài, Bộ Ngoại giao. Ban tổ chức xin trân trọng cảm ơn và nhiệt liệt chào mừng các diễn giả trong nước, ngoài nước, các vị đại biểu, các vị khách quý đến từ cơ quan Đảng, Nhà nước, các bộ, ban, ngành trung ương và địa phương, các tổ chức quốc tế, các doanh nghiệp, các hiệp hội, viện nghiên cứu, trường đại học, đơn vị tài trợ, các cơ quan truyền thông, báo chí. Một lần nữa, ban tổ chức xin trân trọng cảm ơn và chào mừng quý vị. Tiếp theo chương trình, ban tổ chức xin trân trọng và kính mời Phó giáo sư tiến sĩ Đào Văn Hùng, Giám đốc Học viện Chính sách và Phát triển Bộ Kế hoạch và Đầu tư lên đọc diễn văn khai mạc. Xin trân trọng kính mời ông.
Kính thưa tiến sĩ Lê Quang Mạnh, Thứ trưởng Bộ Kế hoạch và Đầu tư, thưa tất cả các quý vị đại biểu, thưa các nhà khoa học trong nước quốc tế, các nhà tài trợ, các hãng truyền thông và các quý vị đại biểu có mặt trong khán phòng ngày hôm nay. Trước tiên, thay mặt ban tổ chức, tôi xin liệt liệt chào mừng quý vị tham gia Diễn đàn Bền Vững lần thứ 2 với chủ đề thúc đẩy tăng trưởng kinh tế và xã hội toàn diện phục vụ phát triển bền vững. Là một cái chủ đề rất có ý nghĩa đối với Việt Nam trong bối cảnh hiện nay. Thưa các quý vị, cũng vào dịp này năm 2018, Học viện Chính sách và Phát triển phối hợp với Hội Khoa học và Chuyên gia Việt Nam toàn cầu dưới sự bảo trợ của Bộ Kế hoạch và Đầu tư, Bộ Ngoại giao đã tổ chức thành công Diễn đàn Bền Vững Việt Nam lần thứ nhất tại Trung tâm Hội nghị Quốc gia Hà Nội, thu hút được nhiều sự quan tâm của các học giả có uy tín trong nước và quốc tế, các nhà hoạch định chính sách, các cơ quan quản lý từ trung ương đến địa phương, các doanh nghiệp. Diễn đàn Bền Vững Việt Nam lần 2 sẽ tiếp nối thành công của diễn đàn năm 2018 lần thứ nhất, tiếp tục là địa chỉ uy tín cho các cuộc gặp gỡ trao đổi về lộ trình thực hiện các chính sách bền vững ở Việt Nam, cũng như nhấn mạnh vào việc trao đổi kinh nghiệm và phối hợp chính sách ở cấp độ quốc tế. Vì sao chúng tôi lại lựa chọn diễn đàn này? Như quý vị đã biết, trong thời gian vừa qua, chúng ta đã được nghe nhiều về thuật ngữ về bền vững. Điều này cho thấy các chính sách đưa ra không chỉ giải quyết một vấn đề ở thời điểm hiện tại, mà còn phải đảm bảo tính bền vững trong dài hạn, tương lai. Theo Diễn đàn Bền Vững Thế giới, phát triển bền vững là một quá trình phát triển có sự kết hợp chặt chẽ, hợp lý và hài hòa giữa ba mặt của sự phát triển. Một là phát triển kinh tế, nhất là tăng trưởng kinh tế. hai là phát triển xã hội, nhất là thực hiện tiến bộ công bằng xã hội, xóa đói, giảm nghèo và giải quyết việc làm. Và ba là bảo vệ môi trường, nhất là xử lý khắc phục ô nhiễm, phục hồi và cải thiện chất lượng môi trường, phòng chống cháy, chặt phá rừng, khai thác hợp lý và sử dụng tiết kiệm tài nguyên thiên nhiên. Thưa các quý vị, chúng ta đang sống trong một thời đại mà tất cả các quốc gia đều chịu ảnh hưởng mạnh mẽ của cuộc cách mạng công nghiệp lần thứ tư, chịu sự cạnh tranh khốc liệt trong các quan hệ quốc tế, và sự tác động của khoa học công nghệ sẽ kéo theo sự thay đổi tác động về chính trị, văn hóa và xã hội. Nói cách khác, để phát triển thịnh vượng thì mỗi quốc gia cần chú trọng đến chính sách về phát triển bền vững, phát triển hài hòa các yếu tố từ quản trị đất nước, trình độ khoa học công nghệ đến chất lượng nguồn nhân lực. Trên cơ sở đó, ban tổ chức tin tưởng rằng kết quả trao đổi của các quý vị trong diễn đàn này sẽ có những đóng góp giá trị trong hoạch định chính sách và phát triển bền vững Việt Nam trong thời gian tới, nhất là việc chuẩn bị xây dựng chiến lược phát triển kinh tế xã hội trong giai đoạn 2021-2030 ở Việt Nam. Thưa quý vị, một lần nữa thay mặt ban tổ chức, tôi xin chân thành cảm ơn các đơn vị bảo trợ, Bộ Kế hoạch và Đầu tư, Bộ Ngoại giao, các đơn vị tài trợ, các tổ chức truyền thông, các quý vị đại biểu đã tham gia buổi diễn đàn ngày hôm nay. Và xin chân thành cảm ơn các nhà khoa học trong nước và quốc tế, các vị đại biểu, các hãng truyền thông báo chí tham dự diễn đàn. Chúc quý vị sức khỏe, hạnh phúc, thành đạt và chúc diễn đàn Bền vững Việt Nam lần thứ 2 thành công tốt đẹp. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn.
Trân trọng kính mời giáo sư Nguyễn Đức Khương, Chủ tịch Hội Khoa học và Chuyên gia Việt Nam toàn cầu AVLS Global lên giới thiệu với chương trình. Xin trân trọng kính mời ông.
Kính thưa ông Lê Quang Mạnh, Thứ trưởng Bộ Kế hoạch Đầu tư. Kính thưa ông Nguyễn Hoài Nam, Phó Chủ nhiệm Ủy ban Người Việt ở nước ngoài, Bộ Ngoại giao. Thưa các diễn giả, đại diện lãnh đạo các cơ quan trung ương địa phương, đại diện các doanh nghiệp và toàn thể quý vị đại biểu tham dự diễn đàn ngày hôm nay. Thay mặt ban tổ chức thì tôi xin được chào mừng quý vị đến với diễn đàn chính sách và lãnh đạo trong khuôn khổ của Diễn đàn Bền vững Việt Nam 2019 với cái chủ đề là thúc đẩy tăng trưởng kinh tế và xã hội toàn diện phục vụ phát triển bền vững. Thông thường thì khi mà đứng trước những thách thức và khó khăn ấy, thì tôi thấy rằng là con người chúng ta luôn thể hiện mình là có khả năng ứng phó, có khả năng sáng tạo rất là tuyệt vời và luôn tìm ra những giải pháp và cải tiến những giải pháp này mỗi ngày để cho nó tốt hơn. Và nếu như những cái biến động khó lường của nền kinh tế thế giới, khó khăn của thương mại toàn cầu hiện nay đang diễn ra với những cái nguyên nhân như là cái chủ nghĩa bảo hộ ngày càng gia tăng, rồi chiến tranh thương mại, nguy cơ chiến tranh thương mại vân vân, và đang là những cái phép thử cho những cái sự linh hoạt cũng như là những cái giải pháp được cho là kháng cự tốt của nền kinh tế ở khắp nơi, thì biến đổi khí hậu và ảnh hưởng của nó và những tác động tiêu cực của nó lên tăng trưởng, sức khỏe con người, môi trường vân vân là một cái thách thức toàn cầu trong dài hạn. Đây là một thách thức rất là lớn, cần một cái sự phối hợp toàn cầu, cần những giải pháp ở cấp độ địa phương tại nơi chúng ta sinh sống và làm việc, và việc áp dụng một tư duy bền vững của mỗi chúng ta, của mỗi cơ quan và tổ chức. Chắc quý vị còn nhớ rằng là năm 2015 thì tại Paris thì có một cái hiệp ước về biến đổi khí hậu của Liên Hợp Quốc trong khuôn khổ Công ước chung của Liên Hợp Quốc về biến đổi khí hậu có ảnh hưởng chi phối đến các biện pháp giảm khí phát thải từ năm 2020 trở đi. Theo cái người mà chủ trì của cái hội nghị này là ông Laurent Fabius, Bộ trưởng Bộ Ngoại giao thời đó, thì ông nói rằng là đây là một kế hoạch đầy tham vọng và là một bước đột phá trong tiến trình chống lại cái ảnh hưởng tiêu cực của biến đổi khí hậu. Thì mục tiêu của cái thỏa thuận Paris là gì? Mục tiêu là thứ nhất là chúng ta nhanh nhất đạt được cái mức phát thải tối đa và từ đó giảm cái mức phát thải này trong 50 năm còn lại của thế kỷ 21. Mục tiêu thứ hai là giữ nhiệt độ toàn cầu không tăng quá 2 độ C và nếu được thì không vượt quá 1,5 độ C. Tại sao cái thỏa thuận này lại quan trọng đến như vậy? Để trả lời cái câu hỏi này thì tôi có một đồng nghiệp là ông giáo sư Tom Compass ở Đại học Melbourne. Và đây là một trong những diễn giả mà chúng tôi dự kiến ở Diễn đàn Bền vững Việt Nam. Nhưng mà vì lý do sức khỏe ở phút cuối thì ông không đến tham dự được với chúng ta. Thì ông cùng các đồng nghiệp đã nghiên cứu ảnh hưởng của cái tăng nhiệt độ toàn cầu lên tăng trưởng kinh tế. Ở 139 quốc gia khác nhau trên thế giới, và Tom và nhóm tác giả này đưa ra những bằng chứng thực nghiệm rất là quan trọng như sau. Thứ nhất là kinh tế toàn cầu sẽ được hưởng lợi nếu như chúng ta thực hiện lộ trình cũng như là những giải pháp mà Hiệp ước Paris đã đưa ra, tức là giới hạn mức tăng nhiệt độ ở 2 độ C. Thứ hai, nếu nhiệt độ tăng lên 4 độ C thay vì cho 2 độ C khi mà chúng ta thực hiện cái thỏa ước này, thì kinh tế toàn cầu sẽ thiệt hại khoảng 17.489 tỷ đô một năm kể từ năm 2100. Năm 2100 với chúng ta thì xa, nhưng mà với thế hệ mai sau của chúng ta thì chắc là ngày mai thôi ạ. Những quốc gia và khu vực có thiệt hại lớn nhất ở châu Phi là gồm châu Phi, vùng hạ Sahara, Ấn Độ và Đông Nam Á. Với Việt Nam của chúng ta thì sao? Kết quả nghiên cứu của nhóm nghiên cứu này cho rằng với giả định là nhiệt độ tăng lên 3 độ C thì tăng trưởng GDP của Việt Nam sẽ thiệt hại, thu nhập quốc dân của Việt Nam sẽ thiệt hại với một mức tương đương là 7,9% của GDP. Hình dung là nếu chúng ta nếu mà nhiệt độ là tăng lên là 4 độ C thì cái con số này là 11,7%. Nếu như là GDP của chúng ta vào thời điểm năm 2050 là vào tầm khoảng 3.000 tỷ thì như vậy là chúng ta sẽ mất 300 tỷ do ảnh hưởng của biến đổi khí hậu. Những kết quả trên đây thì được dựa tính toán trên một cái mô hình mà cân bằng tổng thể tính từ ảnh hưởng tăng nhiệt độ lên nhiều yếu tố, trong đó là thiệt hại trong năng suất của ngành nông nghiệp, sức khỏe của con người, năng suất của người lao động và nhu cầu năng lượng cũng như là lưu lượng khách du lịch. Và đây là những kết quả được công bố trong một tạp chí khoa học uy tín gọi là Earth Future, tương lai của trái đất. Xin được gửi lời cảm ơn đến giáo sư Tom Kompas và chúc ông sức khỏe nhân cái sự kiện này. Hôm qua thì trong cái hội thảo khoa học cũng trong khuôn khổ của Diễn đàn Bền Vững Việt Nam thì giáo sư Tedlock Temzelite từ Viện Chính sách Công Baker của Đại học Rice ở Mỹ cũng chỉ ra trong một nghiên cứu của ông rằng là rủi ro mà chúng ta không định trước được, tức là rủi ro mà không theo bất kỳ một cái quy luật xác suất nào mà chúng ta biết, thì nó có thể yêu cầu chúng ta là phải tối ưu hóa những lựa chọn của mình dựa trên một cái giả định là tình huống xấu nhất có thể xảy ra. Nhiều bài báo cáo khác nhau của ngày hôm qua trên nhiều chủ đề như là chiến lược về đào tạo nguồn nhân lực, chính sách quản lý cho chống và biến đổi khí hậu, rủi ro từ biến đổi khí hậu, chuyển đổi năng lượng cũng như là những khía cạnh xã hội khác cũng cho thấy là nếu chúng ta tư duy theo cách này thì chúng ta sẽ sáng tạo hơn và chúng ta sẽ nhanh chóng tìm ra những giải pháp hiệu quả và thích ứng tốt hơn với những thay đổi của biến đổi khí hậu, sự nóng lên của trái đất. Và đêm qua thì rất là bất ngờ là một đồng nghiệp của tôi có gửi cho tôi một bài báo trên Scientific American. Bài báo này chứng minh một điều là những con cá voi sống ở đại dương có thể giúp cho chúng ta giảm khí phát thải toàn cầu. Thông qua những hoạt động của cá voi thì tạo ra trên một cái bề mặt của đại dương là có những cái chất dinh dưỡng mà nó đi từ phía đáy của đại dương đi lên, và như vậy là nuôi sống một hệ sinh thái tảo và thực vật trên biển. Và đây là nền tảng để chúng ta cân bằng về sinh thái và hấp thụ khí thải carbonic. Nhưng mà đồng thời với cái xu thế như vậy thì chúng ta thấy rằng nếu mà chúng ta bảo tồn cá voi thì chúng ta sẽ bảo vệ được trái đất, một hành động rất là đơn giản. Nhưng mà cũng nhiều chính phủ là vẫn tiếp tục thường xuyên cho phép săn cá voi. Thì tôi thấy rằng là đây có một sự chênh lệch giữa kết quả nghiên cứu khoa học và những hành động chính sách. Như vậy là rõ ràng là xanh không phải chỉ đơn thuần là một màu xanh, đúng không ạ? Mà xanh ở đây là một tư duy và chúng ta cần cái sự tham gia của tất cả mọi người. Để thay đổi được tư duy thì chúng ta cần làm gì? Để thay đổi tư duy thì chúng ta phải thường xuyên gặp gỡ nhau nhiều hơn, trao đổi với nhau kiến thức, kinh nghiệm và cách thức làm việc tốt nhất để có thể tìm ra những giải pháp phù hợp cho những cái vấn đề mà chúng ta đang gặp phải, đặc biệt liên quan đến một thách thức biến đổi khí hậu trong dài hạn. Và đây chính là những việc mà chúng ta sẽ làm tại đây, tại Diễn đàn Bền Vững Việt Nam. Khi bạn và các bạn đã đến nơi đây thì tôi nghĩ rằng các bạn đã có một sự lựa chọn khác biệt về tầm nhìn và hành động với biến đổi khí hậu. Tôi tin là các bạn và chúng ta sẽ có những cái thảo luận thú vị, sẽ có những đề xuất chính sách và hành động phù hợp ở mỗi phiên thảo luận chuyên đề, và chúng ta hãy cùng nhau làm mọi chuyện đơn giản nhất có thể, nhưng mà không đơn giản hơn những gì mà chúng ta cần thiết, đúng không ạ? Đây chính là câu nói của Albert Einstein, tức là making everything as simple but not simpler. Chúc quý vị đại biểu, toàn thể các vị khách quý một năm mới an khang thịnh vượng, sức khỏe dồi dào và chúc cho chúng ta có một hội nghị thành công tốt đẹp. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn giáo sư Nguyễn Đức Khương về những chia sẻ của các nghiên cứu rất là thú vị. Tiếp theo chương trình, ban tổ chức xin trân trọng và kính mời lên sân khấu ông Lê Quang Mạnh, Thứ trưởng Bộ Kế hoạch và Đầu tư phát biểu chỉ đạo với chủ đề Phát triển bền vững ở Việt Nam, các hành động định hướng chiến lược và kết quả đạt được. Xin trân trọng kính mời ông.
Kính thưa các ngài đồng chủ tọa hội nghị, kính thưa toàn thể hội nghị, thưa quý bà quý ông. Thì theo như đúng chương trình thì ngày hôm nay bắt đầu dự kiến là Bộ trưởng Bộ Kế hoạch Nguyễn Chí Dũng sẽ có cái bài phát biểu khai mạc hội nghị của chúng ta. Nhưng mà do cái lý do sức khỏe đột xuất thì hôm nay tôi được rất là vinh dự thay mặt cho lãnh đạo của Bộ Kế hoạch có một số cái nội dung để phát biểu trong cái phiên khai mạc của cái hội nghị hết sức là quan trọng này. Thưa quý vị đại biểu, cho phép tôi được nhiệt liệt chào mừng tất cả các quý vị đại biểu đã tham dự cái Diễn đàn Bền vững Việt Nam lần thứ 2 với chủ đề là thúc đẩy tăng trưởng kinh tế và xã hội toàn diện để phục vụ cho phát triển bền vững. Như giáo sư Đào Hùng đã nói, đây là một chủ đề hết sức là quan trọng và có ý nghĩa cũng như là có tính thời sự đối với lại cái quá trình vận động của nền kinh tế Việt Nam trong cái thời gian hiện nay. Thưa các quý vị, thì phát triển bền vững thì chúng ta cũng biết là nó bao hàm không chỉ có cái nội dung về tăng trưởng kinh tế mà còn là gắn liền với việc giải quyết các cái vấn đề về xã hội và môi trường. Quá trình toàn cầu hóa kinh tế đang diễn ra một cách rất là nhanh chóng và mạnh mẽ. Nó mang lại nhiều cơ hội nhưng cũng đồng thời cũng nhiều thách thức cho các quốc gia. Về cái mô thức phát triển bền vững thì đang hiện nay trở thành một cái lựa chọn phổ biến của các quốc gia trên thế giới và trong đó cũng có Việt Nam. Chúng ta cũng Việt Nam nhận thức được cái tăng trưởng kinh tế đồng thời với việc giải quyết các vấn đề về an sinh xã hội và môi trường là mục tiêu kép cho phát triển đất nước. Do vậy là ngay từ năm 2004 thì chúng tôi cũng đã có cái ban hành chương trình nghị sự 21 với định hướng phát triển bền vững Việt Nam gắn với 3 cái lĩnh vực quan trọng là kinh tế, xã hội và môi trường. Và cái giai đoạn 2011-2020 khi xây dựng cái chiến lược phát triển đất nước trong cái giai đoạn 11-20 thì chúng tôi cũng xác định là trên cơ sở 3 cái khâu đột phá mang tính chiến lược để tạo những cái tiền đề cấu trúc lại nền kinh tế và chuyển đổi cái mô hình tăng trưởng và phát triển nhấn mạnh theo cái hướng là bền vững. Có thể nói là phát triển bền vững nó trở thành một cái phương thức phát triển tổng hợp đa ngành, liên ngành và thành chương trình hành động tại Việt Nam với rất nhiều các cái tiêu chí cũng như các hành động cụ thể. Sau một cái giai đoạn như các quý vị đại biểu cũng biết là gần 30 năm, hơn 30 năm kể từ khi đổi mới thì đến nay Việt Nam đã có những cái bước phát triển hết sức là mạnh mẽ, đời sống người dân thì được cải thiện, tỷ lệ đói nghèo giảm mạnh. Chúng tôi đã trở thành nước có mức thu nhập trung bình thấp từ năm 2010 và hiện nay thì chúng tôi đã hội nhập ngày càng sâu rộng hơn vào cái nền kinh tế thế giới. 2018 thì tổng kim ngạch xuất nhập khẩu của Việt Nam đã đạt trên cái 2 lần so với cái tổng GDP, thể hiện là nước thứ 5 trên thế giới mà có cái tỷ lệ xuất nhập khẩu cao như vậy so với GDP. Nó thể hiện một cái độ mở rất là lớn của nền kinh tế. Và đấy cũng là cái quan điểm, một cái chiến lược phát triển của chúng tôi dựa trên quá trình hội nhập, dựa trên cái xuất khẩu để tạo ra cái tăng trưởng cho đất nước. Và cái quá trình phát triển chung đã tạo ra một cái tầm vóc, một cái vị thế và một uy tín mới cho Việt Nam trên trường quốc tế, được cộng đồng quốc tế ghi nhận và đánh giá cao. Năm 2018 vừa qua thì quý vị đại biểu cũng đã biết là chúng tôi đã có đạt được một cái mức tăng trưởng GDP rất là đáng khích lệ với cái mức là 7,08%, có thể nói là cao nhất trong cái khu vực. Đến giờ phút này chúng tôi có được số liệu thống kê. Và thặng dư thương mại lần đầu tiên đã đạt cái mức là trên 7 tỷ đô la Mỹ. Và kim ngạch xuất nhập khẩu cũng đạt con số tăng trưởng hết sức là ấn tượng. Với tất cả các cái bức tranh về kinh tế như vậy thì tôi cũng xin nhấn mạnh cái khía cạnh về giảm nghèo, cũng là một cái quốc gia được Liên Hợp Quốc đánh giá là có một cái quốc gia thành công trong các vấn đề xử lý các cái an sinh xã hội, giảm nghèo cũng như là có một sự phát triển hài hòa giữa các cái vùng miền và các cái khu vực của dân cư. Trước đây chúng tôi có một cái tỷ lệ già nghèo rất là lớn. Khi bắt đầu cải cách chúng tôi có trên 60% dân số là ở tỷ lệ đỏ nghèo. Nhưng đến nay thì cái mức này chỉ còn là khoảng độ 7%. Đây là một cái thể hiện cái quá trình theo đuổi mục tiêu kép của đất nước, duy trì giữa một cái tốc độ tăng trưởng cao và một cái giải quyết hiệu quả các cái vấn đề của an sinh xã hội. Thu nhập bình quân của chúng tôi ấy, thì đến nay cũng đã đạt là trên 2.500 đô la Mỹ bình quân đầu người, và đây là một cái kết quả có thể nói là rất là khả quan. Tuy nhiên thì với cái bối cảnh thay đổi mạnh mẽ và nhanh chóng của nền kinh tế thế giới trong thời gian gần đây, cũng như là một cái tình trạng, một cái mức độ phát triển của một cái quốc gia mà mới đang ở mức thu nhập trung bình thấp như hiện nay, thì rõ ràng là những cái cơ hội và thách thức đối với Việt Nam tôi là hết sức là đan xen. Thế thì chúng tôi nhận thức được là Việt Nam đang ở một cái thời điểm hết sức quan trọng, hoặc là chúng tôi có thể tiếp tục tăng trưởng nhanh, tiếp tục duy trì được một cái đà phát triển để làm sao mà có thể trở thành một cái nước có cái mức thu nhập trung bình cao vào cuối những năm đến năm 2030, hoặc là chúng tôi có thể sẽ rơi vào dưới bẫy thu nhập trung bình thôi và không thoát được ra khỏi cái tình trạng cái mức độ phát triển như ngày hôm nay, nếu như không giải quyết tốt được các cái vấn đề xung quanh bên cạnh cái câu chuyện về tăng trưởng, đó là các cái vấn đề về an sinh, về ổn định xã hội, các cái vấn đề về môi trường, các vấn đề về phân bổ nguồn lực hợp lý. Do vậy thì với cái bối cảnh như vậy, trong thời điểm hiện nay thì chúng tôi xác định rằng Việt Nam cần phải thay đổi cái tư duy từ một cái gọi là quan điểm phát triển để ổn định, thay cho cái quan điểm trước đây chúng tôi luôn luôn là ổn định để phát triển. Vì các quý vị đại biểu cũng biết là ra khỏi chiến tranh cũng như là ra khỏi cái khủng hoảng kinh tế của những cái năm giữa những năm 80 của thế kỷ trước ấy, thì cái nhu cầu ổn định, cái sự mong muốn có một cái sự ổn định ở đất nước, đó là cái cao nhất. Cho nên là mọi cái phấn đấu cũng như là trên cơ sở cho rằng ổn định là một cái nền tảng quan trọng, thì chúng tôi mới tạo ra được động lực phát triển. Thì cái tư duy đó đến ngày hôm nay cũng đã phần nào cản trở cái sự năng động của nền kinh tế, phần nào cản trở cái bước đi tiếp theo của chúng tôi. Do vậy trong cái giai đoạn này chúng tôi xác định 10 năm tới, 20 năm tới chúng tôi phải lấy phát triển để tạo ra một sự ổn định. Chúng tôi phải có duy trì được một cái sự tăng trưởng kinh tế, duy trì được một cái sức mạnh về các cái hoạt động kinh tế trong đất nước, thì mới có thể tạo ra đủ của cải, tạo ra đủ nguồn lực để giải quyết các cái bài toán về xã hội, về môi trường. Vì chúng ta cũng thấy là nói về các cái cạnh môi trường và an sinh xã hội thì rất là dễ, nhưng với một cái quốc gia như Việt Nam gần 95 triệu dân, thì để làm sao có đủ nguồn lực, để làm sao có đủ tài chính, làm sao có đủ các cái điều kiện cho một đất nước như này bền vững được, giải quyết được hài hòa, cân đối đầy đủ, thì chúng tôi phải có đủ cái nguồn lực về kinh tế. Như vậy chúng tôi xác định một cách rất rõ ràng tăng trưởng kinh tế và phát triển bền vững với hai cái trụ cột về xã hội và môi trường là một cái sự gắn kết không thể tách rời. Đấy chính là cái xuyên suốt trong cái tư tưởng chỉ đạo của việc xây dựng chính sách trong giai đoạn hiện nay của chúng tôi. Vì thế khi mà xây dựng cái chiến lược phát triển kinh tế xã hội giai đoạn 2021-2030 sắp tới đây ấy, thì chúng tôi cũng đang rất là trăn trở suy nghĩ để xác định các cái nội dung quan trọng đưa vào trong cái chiến lược này nhằm đạt được cái mục tiêu phát triển bền vững như tôi vừa nói. Và trong đó thì chúng tôi cũng xác định là sẽ tập trung vào các cái 5 cái lĩnh vực hết sức là quyết định. Thứ nhất đó là nguồn nhân lực. Thứ hai là các cái chính sách để ứng phó với biến đổi khí hậu. Thứ ba là phải xây dựng một cái nền nông nghiệp thông minh, hiệu quả. Thứ tư là các cái giải pháp về môi trường. Và thứ năm, làm sao tận dụng được cái cơ hội của cuộc cách mạng công nghiệp 4.0 hiện nay, cũng như là các cái đổi mới sáng tạo để tạo cái động lực mới cho nền kinh tế. Và tôi cũng rất là mừng khi thấy đây cũng chính là những cái chủ đề chính của cái diễn đàn của chúng ta ngày hôm nay. Chủ đề này cho thấy một cái quan tâm hết sức là xác đáng của tất cả các cái quý vị đại biểu, của các nhà khoa học đối với những cái vấn đề mà về phía chính phủ chúng tôi rằng là rất là thời sự và hết sức là quan trọng. Chúng ta cũng biết rằng đây là một cái chủ đề có một cái phạm vi rất là rộng, có một cái sự đan xen, đồng thời nó cũng mang một cái tính quốc tế quan trọng trong cái giai đoạn lịch sử này. Tăng trưởng kinh tế và xã hội toàn diện để phục vụ cho cái nhu cầu của con người luôn là một cái chủ đề được thảo luận cho gần đây. Giải Nobel Kinh tế năm 2018 thì cũng đã thuộc về hai nhà khoa học của Mỹ và phát triển cái phương pháp giải quyết cái câu hỏi cơ bản và cấp thiết, đó là điều chỉnh lý thuyết kinh tế để đánh giá tốt hơn ảnh hưởng của các vấn đề môi trường và tiến bộ kỹ thuật đối với tăng trưởng. Đồng thời cũng trả lời cái câu hỏi làm thế nào để thúc đẩy tăng trưởng kinh tế bền vững trong dài hạn song song với cải thiện phúc lợi con người. Để chính sách phát triển bền vững đi vào cuộc sống thì cần có cái sự tham gia tích cực và trách nhiệm của mọi người dân, của doanh nghiệp, của các tổ chức, chính quyền. Các cái giải pháp, các cách làm tốt thì đến từ kinh nghiệm trong và ngoài nước thì cần được chia sẻ, thảo luận và đưa vào thực tiễn. Đấy cũng chính là cái mục tiêu của diễn đàn ta ngày hôm nay. Thưa quý vị đại biểu, sự phát triển ổn định và bền vững của mỗi quốc gia sẽ đóng góp cho thịnh vượng chung của thế giới, và tôi cũng tin tưởng rằng diễn đàn của chúng ta hôm nay là nơi kết nối các nhà khoa học, các lực lượng trí thức, doanh nghiệp nước ngoài và Việt Nam. Những cái kết quả trao đổi, những cái ý tưởng, những cái khuyến nghị trong diễn đàn cùng với cái sự hiện diện hết sức quý báu của quý vị đại biểu sẽ đóng góp giá trị vào cái quá trình hoạch định chính sách phát triển bền vững ở Việt Nam trong thời gian tới, nhất là trong cái quá trình chúng tôi đang xây dựng cái văn kiện Đại hội Đảng lần thứ 13 và cái chiến lược phát triển kinh tế xã hội giai đoạn 21-30 cho Việt Nam. Như giáo sư Đào Hùng đã nói, năm ngoái vào thời gian này thì diễn đàn bền vững Việt Nam lần thứ nhất đã thu hút được cái sự quan tâm của học giả có uy tín trong nước và quốc tế, các nhà hoạch định chính sách, các cơ quan quản lý từ trung ương đến địa phương, các doanh nghiệp, các hãng truyền thông báo chí. Qua đó thì đã có những cái đóng góp không nhỏ vào quá trình hoạch định chính sách của Việt Nam. Tôi rất mong rằng diễn đàn bền vững Việt Nam lần thứ hai sẽ tiếp nối thành công của diễn đàn lần thứ nhất đã được thành công như vậy. Tiếp tục sẽ là địa chỉ uy tín cho gặp gỡ, trao đổi về cái lộ trình thực hiện các chính sách phát triển bền vững của Việt Nam trên cơ sở trao đổi kinh nghiệm và phối hợp chính sách ở cấp độ quốc tế. Do đó, tôi mong muốn diễn đàn sẽ được tiếp tục tổ chức thường xuyên hàng năm. Về phía Bộ Kế hoạch Tư chúng tôi thì luôn sẵn sàng bảo trợ và cùng đồng hành với ban tổ chức. Thay mặt cho lãnh đạo của Bộ Tư, tôi xin cảm ơn quý vị đại biểu đã tham dự diễn đàn. Cảm ơn tất cả các cái đơn vị bảo trợ, Bộ Ngoại giao, Học viện Chính sách Phát triển, Hội Khoa học và chuyên ngành chuyên gia toàn cầu. Xin cảm ơn các cái đơn vị tài trợ, các cái đơn vị, các hãng truyền thông báo chí đưa tin của hội nghị này. Tôi tin tưởng rằng với các cái quan hệ đối tác toàn cầu, đoàn kết và quyết tâm cao của chúng ta thì các mục tiêu nhằm thúc đẩy tăng trưởng và xã hội toàn diện, phục vụ cho phát triển bền vững sẽ được thực hiện thành công, đáp ứng khát vọng của nhân loại vì một thế giới hòa bình, công bằng và phát triển bền vững. Cuối cùng, nhân dịp năm mới và chuẩn bị đón một cái xuân kỷ hợi sắp tới đây, tôi xin chúc tất cả các quý vị đại biểu một năm mới dồi dào sức khỏe, nhiều niềm vui và hạnh phúc. Xin cảm ơn quý vị.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn phát biểu chỉ đạo của Thứ trưởng Lê Quang Mạnh, Bộ Kế hoạch và Đầu tư. Sau đây là những phát biểu chính trong phiên toàn thể của Diễn đàn Bền vững 2019. Tiếp theo, ban tổ chức xin trân trọng và kính mời ông Rylander Jane, Giám đốc chương trình rà soát đa chiều các quốc gia của OECD phát triển với chủ đề Phát triển bền vững, tiền tệ sản xuất, con người, thiên nhiên, thể chế, giải pháp để tập trung thay đổi các vấn đề cốt lõi tại Việt Nam. Xin trân trọng kính mời ông.
Dear Vice Minister, dear distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm really pleased to be here with you. I come with greetings from the OECD and the OECD Development Center. And I would like to talk about sustainable development, where we see sustainable development as the next step in the evolution of the concept of development, and how we operationalize it as we work with countries in what we call the multidimensional country reviews. I'm waiting for my presentation to come up. I am in charge of these multidimensional country reviews, and what I'll be telling you today about is really what we do and what we've learned as we've now worked with 11 different countries across the world, and I hope it'll be full of interesting insights for you. Is there a clicker or something for the? Okay, it's coming. Excellent. Good. The first slide will be about. Here we go. Okay. The first slide is really going back to development, if you want, pre-sustainable, when it was just about growth. And just to show you, this is something many of you have probably seen. One shows you the growth in GDP per capita of Korea. The other line shows you the GDP per capita of Ghana over a certain amount of time. Okay, thank you. And you just see that there is a massive difference in the performance. And what I would like to argue is that actually while we all have seen that Korea has developed very rapidly, it's not so easy to understand really everything that you need to have for rapid development to take off. This graph, for example, shows you this is something that we did in 2012. It looks at how have countries, what's been the growth rate of countries between 2000 and 2012. That's on the vertical axis. And on the horizontal axis, you see what is the growth that these countries would need from 2012 until 2050 to reach the average per capita income of OECD countries. So if you want to say development is about making it to high income level, and then you see that only few of these countries find themselves above this diagonal line, and countries need to be above that diagonal line to be able to make it to that income category. And this was in 2012. It changed again today, and actually many of those countries that were above are even below. So just to show that this is not so straightforward, the development question. Now I would like to actually ask you a question. This is a country, this was in 2010. So this was a lower middle income country. It had 5% average GDP per capita growth since 1990, so 20 years of 5% growth, a primary enrollment rate of 100% in education, so great achievement, 80% healthcare coverage for the population, which also is a great achievement. A 3% fiscal deficit would have made the Eurozone criteria, and a very good reformer in doing business. Does anybody have an idea of what country I could potentially be talking about in 2010? No, it's not Vietnam. It's actually from another continent. I'll give it away. This was Tunisia just before the Arab Spring. And I like to use this example because you might have, you probably have heard of that in 2010 and 2011. There were massive demonstrations. Actually, there was a change in government. Many things happened in Tunisia and many other countries in the region. And why I like to use this example, it's because it shows that at the time, what you see here are all the things that at the time people thought this is development. These are the key indicators you need to measure, and if you do well on all of these, you're developing really well. And it just shows that there's actually much more to development, and that we didn't really know so well how development works and how to measure it. And so therefore, I would like to argue that we need to have a more multidimensional, a broader understanding of what you need for development. And I would like to argue that sustainable development and the Sustainable Development Goals are taking it into that direction. Now let me bring you another interesting conundrum about development. You see here two circles. Imagine these are two different countries. You have country A and country B. But what I would like to argue is that what you see here is the opportunity space of both of these countries. And now let's imagine that the blue circle is the country as you see it today, so the realized space of what the country has been able to achieve. And now the key problem with development is that when you look at both of these countries, you actually are not able to see the underlying opportunity space. We don't actually know whether country A has a green or red circle or country B has a green or red circle. And that is actually a key challenge, and that's something I would like to argue, that this is about capabilities, and we need to broaden our understanding to get a better grip of understanding the green and the red circle. I'll come back to that in just a second. So to take a step back, I will give you my take on the history of development thinking. Many of you will argue it's granted, it's a very particular take to tell a story. But what I would like to show you is that the way how we've been thinking about development has evolved, and that we continue to evolve in this thinking. So in the 1950s, development was really understood as being about capital accumulation, as being about the big push. It's really about financing, about investment in infrastructure, and then development is going to happen. That did produce some results, but it also produced a lot of problems. Problems mainly in the form of a lot of debt and a lot of investments that weren't really done very effectively. So then in the 1980s, there was a big change, and development was understood much more as a result of market efficiency. So the focus was a lot on macroeconomic stability, macroeconomic management, debt management, with a lot of fallout, however, which led us more to the 2000s because a lot of social programs were slashed, a lot of other important programs were being slashed. And we again understood that, well, it cannot only be macroeconomic market efficiency that is development. So in the 2000s, there was this big focus on development as human development. You probably all know Amartya Sen, who wrote in the 90s, and it was really about fighting poverty and focusing on individuals, and that was very important. And then in 2016, there's the next step that, well, we cannot just focus on people and individuals, we have to focus also on, we need to understand there is a planet, there's an environment, there's also society that we need to take into account. And every time we added a new layer of understanding. So all of these schools had an important point. Development does require capital accumulation, evidently. Development also needs macroeconomic stability. A hard budget constraint is a prerequisite to ensure sustainable public finance. Performance pressure from the market is important to ensure productivity growth. But also very importantly, the human element. We must not forget the distinction between means and ends. And many could argue that that had been forgotten at some point. And that growth really can only be called a development if it serves human beings. And in the next steps in sustainable development, it can only be called development if it really also serves the planet and preserves the environment we live in. So I would say, therefore, even until when we focused on human development, I would say that what has been missing is that development is multidimensional and multi-layered. With human development, we had a first step, but there's more to it. And the second argument I would like to make is that capabilities are the key building blocks for development, and that the Sustainable Development Goals help us to get there to a certain extent. And that growth without the extension of capabilities cannot really be sustained. So multidimensionality, the Sustainable Development Goals really are a huge step towards multidimensionality. They have 17 goals that span from social, economic to natural problems. So it's really understanding we need all of these things to fall into place for development to work. This is just a quick way. When you look at, there was research done looking at the MDGs and how they were actually correlated with each other. And we found that there wasn't a lot of correlation actually between many of the individual MDG outcomes. However, when you look at the SDGs and you do a bit of a network analysis comparing the different goals and how they link together, they are highly multidimensional and highly correlated. Multidimensionality is also something that we've been working on at the OECD in the context of what we call the How is Life framework for well-being. This came out of research that was started with Sen, Stiglitz, and Fitoussi in 2008 around how can we measure societal progress, the progress of societies, with something that goes beyond just GDP. And so this framework was developed, which really says well-being is about quality of life and about material conditions. And it came up with 11 dimensions of well-being outcomes that today we use in our analysis, and that I will speak a bit more about in just a second. So how do we bring well-being and capabilities together, and how do we understand capabilities a bit more? So we like to think of development as a tree when we go about our multidimensional reviews and when we discuss development a bit more broadly. And we think of well-being, these ideas of the quality of life and material conditions, really as, if you want, that's what well-being is about, and the environment and the environment, the planet, is very much part of this top of the tree that needs to grow. And then what does a society need? It needs capabilities to make this top of the tree grow. And what does a society have to work with? It has to work with resources. It has to work with capital, with money, with people, with natural resources, with everything, with social capital. All of this is being used in one way or another. And as you use it as a society, you try to transform it into this outcome, which is development, which is about well-being and sustainable development. And what you need in the middle are those capabilities to translate those resources, those inputs into those outcomes. And that's really where development where you need strength as a society, and where we try to focus in our research as to where are some of the key constraints, some of the key bottlenecks. And this is about management capacity, about productive capabilities, around social capabilities to solve conflict, to also let society develop, about innovation, financial sector, and many others. And when we talk about capabilities, what I would like to emphasize is really capabilities is something that includes very much capacities as infrastructure, as factories, or physical capital. But it also very much includes how do different people work together. It's really capability at the level of society is about how can individuals work with each other, how can groups work with each other, how can larger organizations work with each other, and how can all of society work with each other. So we come back to these two circles that I showed you before, and I want to argue that these two circles are the opportunity space that's determined by the capabilities. And these two blue circles are what we see when we look at a country. We look at what is the GDP per capita, we look at what is the enrollment rate, a little bit like what I showed you about Tunisia. We look at all the different indicators, all the data we can collect, shows us roughly these blue circles, and in reality, of course, they don't look like circles. They're very jagged lines, and some things are better than others. But the underlying capability set is what determines the opportunities of these countries, and that's what we try to get at. And that, of course, we believe any sustainable development policy, any plan, any strategy for sustainable development policy needs to think about what is the capability set and how can we expand this capability set. Because evidently, if you have this broader set of opportunities that's determined, as in the green example, really all that is needed is more resources. More money, more investment, and you have the capabilities to translate this into development outcomes. Whereas if the capability set is quite constrained, more resources will not help you because there's no more ability to translate these more resources into better outcomes. And investments will be wasted, investments will not be done right because the capacity is not there to bring about better outcomes. So how do we take all of this and turn it into working with countries and supporting a development? We do what we call the multidimensional reviews, where we proceed in 3 steps. We go about the first step that we call narrative and assessment, then an in-depth analysis, then from analysis to action. I want to tell you a bit about this process and about what we found and how we apply some of these concepts. Something that's very important for us and that we believe is very important when you go about building strategies for, say, sustainable development is to really focus on participation, on bringing in all the voices that are necessary. So we really emphasize embedding participation through different methods, through strategic foresight, through thinking about what could be the vision, what are some of the stories people like to tell each other about the future, and we very much focus on governmental learning, on bringing together all the actors that are important to think about how can you go about implementing a strategy. So in this initial assessment, we apply strategic foresight, as I said. We go about looking at the vision of the country. Then we take the well-being framework that I spoke about, and we look at what is the performance of a country when you compare it to all the other countries in the world. And here, for example, you can see that it gives you a bit of a capability idea. So in the red circle gives you what are all the other countries at the level of development of this country, and then it shows you what are some of the performances. So we look at the quality of life, we look at material conditions, and this is an example of Thailand that shows you, for example, that Thailand does quite well in a lot of areas, but when you look at the environment, for example, Thailand does not perform very well. I would also like to argue that the SDGs help us to guide this thinking about capabilities. They set out in 17 goals really how we'd like to think about sustainable development. And then when we really look at the outcomes across these and how countries perform, they give us a good guide to as what are some of the capabilities that are there and what are some of the capabilities that are not there. So we take these SDGs and we categorize them as the 5 Ps. This is something that's been suggested by the UN, so we took it And as we analyze a country, we look at prosperity, we look at people, we look at partnerships and finance, we look at the planet, and we look at peace and polity to identify where do we see the key constraints and what are some of the key recommendations that would need to be included in a strategy for sustainable development. Something that we like to do, this is an example from Thailand. When you look at the SDGs, we believe it is actually quite useful to look at the past dynamic on an indicator and where the target is, and really look at what has been achieved over the last 15 years. So this gives you a range of indicators. For example, in Thailand here, you could see that the access to electricity for the population has been improved very much already by 2015. But when you look at the improvement in the share of wage and salaried workers, so going from informal vulnerable employment to more quality employment, the second indicator up here, you can see that between 2000 and 2015, this indicator has only improved by 4%, whereas the objective is to achieve 100%. So it is very evident that if in the last 15 years only 4% has been achieved, everything else equal, in the next 15 years it will at best have another 4%. So this is clear that you need a big change in how you go about your development policy if you want to achieve this indicator. It's one of the ways how we look at constraints. If we take a first quick look at Vietnam, and we take our own collection of indicators to give a very high-level overview. So this is not all 240 indicators of the SDGs, but a few. But we look at people, prosperity, planet, polity, and peace and partnerships. We can see that Vietnam, compared to middle-income countries, performs quite well on many of these issues. But some challenges, clearly, when you look at the planet, when you look at environment, sustainable development, there are some challenges there that need to be included in any sustainable development strategy. You also see, when you look at vulnerable employment, that there is a challenge in terms of a large informal sector, in terms of a lot of people not having quality jobs. And you see some challenges in the area of governance that would need to be addressed. So this is, for example, a very first quick look that already gives a guide that there seems to be challenges around the capacity to have a type of development that also takes into account the environment, that really takes care of the planet, and also really produces the social outcomes that you're looking for. When we did this work with Thailand, and I'm going to give you a few examples from Thailand here, we could see that actually growth has been going quite fine for a really long time. Thailand has an impressive growth history, but we could also see that from around 2000, a split started to happen, and you see the top line here is about economic growth, and the dotted line on the bottom is about the growth in terms of salaried jobs. So the growth in terms of people that have a contract, that go to work every day, that have social security, all the things that we consider to be good jobs. And you could see that until the 2000s there was a strong correlation, but since then that economic growth that continued to happen did no longer translate into an increase in good jobs. So there was somehow a split, how social development and economic development didn't continue to go together in the same direction. And this has continued until today, so it is very clear that there is a big constraint in this context of finding new sources of sustainable development. Growth needs to come with new sources in order to continue that further translation of economic growth into also social improvement. And if it doesn't happen, then clearly this challenge and this gap will continue to increase. So this is the broader context. Then we took our 5 Ps. We spent many months and many experts looking at many different issues, and you find that we found a number of key constraints in all of these areas. So we found, for example, that high regional inequalities are behind some of these social issues. We also found that on planet there is a challenge around being locked into carbon-intensive growth, and especially a challenge around how water is managed or is not managed. We find keys around low economic innovation and slow economic transformation. And what I want to show you how we then go about, we take all of these constraints and see what are really the underlying dynamics that would need to be looked at in such a development strategy here. And we find, for example, that we have resource-intensive growth with costly natural disasters as a key challenge. We find growth with high structural inequalities to be another key challenge, and a fragmented social protection system to be another key challenge. And as we went further, we found that really at the core of all of this is really a challenge of how the public sector is organized and how the public sector can deliver services and can interact with these challenges. So this is really then where we've identified some of the cross-cutting challenges as to where does a development strategy need to look at. And then in Thailand, we spent the rest of the year to focus on the issues of water management, to focus on the issues of local government, decentralization, and on regional economic development. How can you overcome regional inequalities in development? Because we found, you remember this first graph I showed you with the separation between the two lines, we found that was very strongly linked to some regions that were doing quite well and some other regions that really had very little economic development. And it was evident that all of these regions need to be able to develop, because the type of industrialization that had carried a lot of the growth was very much concentrated and wasn't able to continue generating the employment and the further social development that was needed for sustainable development everywhere in the country. Some of the other challenges that we find and that we see as key constraints is when we work with Peru, for example, we could see that the rise in total factor productivity, so the overall transformation efficiency of the economy had really started dropping off a lot in the 1980s and has not really recovered. So this is the typical middle income trap, where development has happened quite fast for some time, but then really has dropped and no new sources of growth have been found. Some very interesting work we did with Senegal when we did the same approach that I just showed you. We found that a key challenge here seems to be a very weak social contract. So there is this vicious cycle, if you want, of low trust in the capacity of government to use money for the benefit of citizens. And then in many areas you get low quality public services back. Here was especially around education. As a result, you get a low willingness to pay taxes because you have low quality public services, so people aren't really willing to pay taxes. Then you get low tax revenue, and as a result, again, you have very little money to invest into these types of public services. And what we found was quite interesting in this case is that at the same time, people were quite willing. There's a very high social capital in terms of people supporting each other, people giving money to other institutions, to the family, but the state wasn't really part of this conversation. So this is very particular, but a key challenge. And then here, we then did in-depth work on public finance, on education, on taxation, and that was then made the basis of 3 reform streaks that became the basis of the next development strategy of Senegal. In Uruguay, we found that the education system reinforces inequality and really needs to be reformed if Uruguay wants to overcome one of its key social challenges, which is a very high level of inequality. And the way we went about this, we saw there's a lot of income inequality here in Uruguay. So what could be the reason? It could either be labor income, so some people get really high salaries and other people get very low salaries. It could be non-labor income or taxes and transfers. We found it was a lot about labor income. There was a small share of people that received very good salaries and a lot of people that received very little. And then that could be explained by educational attainment being high or low. So a few people get good education, they get good salaries. The others get bad education, they get bad salaries. Or by returns to skills. And we found it was about the educational attainment. And then again, we saw this could be about socioeconomic status, or it could be about infrastructure quality. So either there's not enough schools, there are no good teachers, or that it's mainly the people that come from rich families, they get good education, and none of the others manage to get good education. And this is really what we found. So we found a good education system in the sense of its outcomes, a good education for some, a good education system in terms of access, but one where it's really the rich that manage to get good education, that manage to get good jobs, but none of those that are not part of that elite manage to get into an education system that transforms them into people with high human capacity. And in a way, if you know that that inequality is a key challenge in the country, you want the education system to be the key engine to turn that around. And we found, for example, here, that this is really something that constrains the ability of this country to move forward. And so then the work on developing the next strategy really focused in on how can you work to make this education system more open. Maybe one last, this here is a slide from Thailand, but it's something similar that we found in Paraguay and some other countries. It's just general that we find when we look at social protection systems, we find they are quite challenged often in that many of these don't benefit mainly the poor, but other people that are not so poor. And in some countries, this can be quite extreme, that you actually have a lot of people that benefit from social protection systems that need it maybe a bit less, and other people that would really need it, they don't benefit from them very much. And this, of course, leads to a lot of social challenges that constrain sustainable development going forward. Maybe just to explain to you how we then conclude in our last step, since I talk a bit about development and a bit about methodology here, we basically bring all of these things together in what we call governmental learning seminars to develop what are the key priorities for the next strategy. And then we think about implementation. Some of this is going. Just the next step really then is about looking at what are the capacities, the capabilities the country needs to turn this around to move this forward. We found that there's a lot of key challenges, key things that are important in public administration. It's about political leadership. It's about the ability to prioritize. It's about getting everyone to work together, which is a key challenge in many countries and really relates back to the set of capabilities. How can larger numbers of people work together efficiently? It's about communicating a national vision. It's about regional development, so development not just concentrated in a few places, but everywhere in the country. It's about monitoring mechanisms, about a culture of evaluation. We find that in many countries, public policy is really driven by setting goals and planning activities, but not really by creating programs in such a way that you can then follow up and check, are we actually achieving the objectives we want to achieve? If we don't achieve them, we need to go back and change something. So this is a key capability in terms of implementation, and we feel this culture is lacking in public policy design in many places. The budget, of course, and then how do you interact with the private sector and civil society? And this is just, again, something that we like to look at. What is the degree of coordination and collaboration between ministries? What is the level of capability around the issues? This is from data from a French research institute that looks at all countries and tries to rank them. And we see here that many countries have challenges around how different parts of the administration, how different ministries can work together. And it seems also that in Vietnam, this would be an area of capability to improve for sustainability, for sustainable development going forward. And then finally, we have the mutual learning group, which is really at the core of the OECD, is that countries come together and exchange about their experiences, that we have peer learning. And so as countries go through this process and have done all this identification of constraints, proposing of strategies, we come together and countries present to each other, and people from different countries with that experience, having implemented reforms themselves, exchange about their own experiences and about their own challenges to really move forward as a peer group and learn from each other. Thank you very much.
Xin chân thành cảm ơn chia sẻ rất thú vị của ông Rylander Jane. Tiếp theo chương trình, ban tổ chức xin trân trọng kính mời bà Wilson Kathleen, đại diện thường trú tại Việt Nam của chương trình Phát triển Liên Hợp Quốc UNDP, phát biểu với chủ đề đầu tư vào nguồn lực con người, giải pháp cho các thay đổi công nghệ nhanh và các biến đổi của thị trường lao động. Xin trân trọng kính mời bà.
Distinguished members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and privilege to be here with you today on the occasion of the second Vietnam Sustainability Forum on the extremely important topic of fostering economic growth and inclusive society for sustainable development. As we know, Vietnam registered significant growth in 2018. Real GDP grew by 7.08%, the highest rate in over a decade. And this growth was led by robust exports, broad-based growth in agriculture, industry, and service sectors. Vietnam is now in a strong position to continue to benefit from an expanding free trade environment and deepened integration in global markets. However, rising tensions in the global economy may create greater global volatility and challenges to sustainable and inclusive growth that will require greater innovation and new, fresh approaches to ensure that, firstly, Vietnam is not left behind in the transition to Industrial Revolution 4.0, and secondly, that no one in Vietnam is left behind. Against this background, how Vietnam engages with the tremendous opportunities presented by Industrial Revolution 4.0 and green growth will have significant impact on the quality, sustainability, and inclusivity of future growth. So far, and as we've heard from the previous speakers, Vietnam's growth has been inclusive. And as the UNDP Vietnam Academy of Social Sciences National Human Development Report of 2016 indicated, growth has been relatively high, with first relatively low inequality, measured by different indicators such as Gini coefficient, Palma, and quintile ratios. So low inequality, which is very good and quite unusual in today's world. And secondly, with improvements of income distribution. So this is quite impressive. The inclusivity of Vietnam's growth has been key to Vietnam's great success in reducing poverty, which has been recognized by the international community and referenced by Vice Minister Meng. Looking forward to Vietnam's next development stage as a low-middle income country, and as Industrial Revolution 4.0 accelerates, the key question is whether Vietnam's growth can continue to be inclusive, can it become greener, can it provide opportunities for many Vietnamese to participate in, contribute to, and benefit from that growth. The transition to a green, low-carbon economy holds the potential to bring significant opportunities to Vietnam. It is estimated that climate change actions combined with Industrial Revolution 4.0 could add US $26 trillion to the global economy and generate 65 million new and decent jobs by 2030. Allow me to highlight 4 key risks and challenges. Firstly, as we've heard, is the low middle income trap risk, and we've heard that from all our speakers. The challenge here is to transform economic growth from exploiting natural resources and cheap, low-skilled labor to a new pathway with enhanced productivity, value addition, competitiveness, and environmental sustainability as the new key drivers of growth that create more employment with higher productivity and income for Vietnamese people. This transformation, often observed in many economies, which involves shifting from early stage of factor-driven to efficiency-driven growth stage, is necessary as Vietnam faces serious competition from other countries in labor and natural resource-intensive industries. It would also help address higher expectations of the wealthier Vietnamese. Secondly, accelerating Industrial Revolution 4.0 offers both opportunities and risks to the future stream of jobs as Vietnam embarks on new growth pathways. It is anticipated that artificial intelligence, or AI, will displace jobs in several sectors that have been driving Vietnam's growth to date. The ILO 2016 report entitled "The Future of Jobs at Risk of Automation" suggests that 70% of jobs in Vietnam are at risk of automation. Sectors with very high proportion of jobs with a high probability of automation risk include agriculture, fisheries, and forestry, that's 83%. Manufacturing, 74%. Food and beverage, 68%. Garment, 85%. And electronics, 75%. motor vehicles 84%, and service sector around 32%. Retail 70%, and banking slightly above 40%. This is quite intimidating in some ways. However, the Oxford Economics and Cisco September 2018 report entitled Technology and the Future of ASEAN Jobs, the impact of AI on workers in ASEAN's 6 largest economies, forecasts that some 7.5 million jobs in manufacturing, agriculture, wholesale, and retail will be displaced by artificial intelligence in the next 10 years in Vietnam. At the same time, the report anticipates that new jobs with different functions, also in manufacturing, wholesale, and retail, hotels, and restaurants, will be created through what the report calls income effect. And thus, the net job loss would be about 1.7 million, with 90% of that loss concentrated in agricultural and mining sectors. Thirdly, whether Vietnam will avoid the low middle income trap and being left behind depends very much on A, Vietnam's private enterprises and how they will grow and transition to the formal economy. Currently, 95% of Vietnamese firms are small, medium enterprises, and more than 70% of Vietnamese workers work in the informal sector. It will also depend on enhancing their productivity and competitiveness. And equally important is how the private sector's investment will increase and how entrepreneurship and innovative application of Industry 4.0 and green technologies will be promoted to create new drivers of growth, including new, greener streams of jobs. Fourthly, the next development stage in Industry 4.0 also poses risks of rising inequality and weakening resilience. Higher returns to those with skills and innovative ideas, in addition to the higher returns to capital and productive assets, will mean the risk of leaving behind those who don't have these skills and those who don't have these assets. Past inclusive growth, as the National Human Development Report indicated, has led to the rapid reduction of the share of the poor population groups to less than 10% in 2014. It has also seen the emergence of a very large middle group, around 70% of the population of what we call near poor, or between $2 to $4 purchasing power parity a day, and low middle income of $4 to $10 per day. While incomes of families of this group of population helps them make ends meet, as these families, who are largely breadwinners working in the informal sector, are not eligible for support from social protection and assistance policies, which are mainly targeted at the poorest and formal workers. And for that reason, the National Human Development Report named this group as the missing middle. It is not sufficient for them to cope with shocks and to take risks, to invest in new business opportunities and reskilling, to adapt to new streams of work and changes in the nature of jobs. This group will need special attention. As the UNDP Molisa Vaz 2018 Poverty Report noted, multidimensional poverty, measured by national multidimensional poverty measurements, remarkably reduced from 16% in 2012 to 9% in 2016, lifting some 6 million people out of multidimensional poverty in just 4 years. Despite these impressive achievements, Vietnam should be mindful of the remaining poverty gaps among geographical region and population groups. Multidimensional poverty rates in the northern mountainous and central highlands are more than 2 times higher than the national average. While the multidimensional poverty incidence among kin majority is only 6.4% in 2016, The rates are very high among some ethnic minority groups. 76% among the Hmong, 37% among the Zhao, 24% among Khmer, and 23% among the Thai in 2016. Whether Vietnam's future growth will continue to be accompanied by relatively low inequality that leaves no one behind depends very much on how Vietnamese children and workers will be equipped with 21st century skills. This is key to enable them to both contribute to creating new drivers of growth and to seizing the new job opportunities that require very different functions. Equally, it will depend on how Vietnam's social protection systems, together with health and education services, can A, help protect those who cannot be reskilled, B, build resilience against income and health shocks, and C, prevent those who are vulnerable, especially the near poor and the low middle income, from falling into poverty. And that means also supporting them and further developing and sustainably lifting them out of poverty. To address these challenges and ensure that Vietnam's future growth and Industrial Revolution 4.0 is inclusive so that all Vietnamese participate in and benefit from it, it will be essential for Vietnam to achieve its human development aspirations and its commitments to realizing the Sustainable Development Goals. It will require active engagement and concerted efforts of what we call a whole of government and whole of society. Let me focus on the importance and zoom in on the importance and vital, as we've heard also about the importance of capabilities and how countries move forward in a sustainable way. I'd like to hone in on new, inclusive, and anticipatory forms of governance and services in generating new sources of growth and more decent jobs for all, and balancing the tremendous opportunity provided by Industry 4.0 against the very real possibility of deepening inequality. In the context of rapid technological progress and uncertainties, new challenges and opportunities, the government has a vital role to play in generating new sources of growth and more decent jobs for all by taking 6 key actions. These include, firstly, creating inclusive platforms that stimulate innovations, nurture and incentivize experimentation of Vietnamese firms in generating new applications of Industry 4.0 technologies that build local value chains and enhance their competitiveness and capabilities to innovatively apply frontier technologies for generating new business opportunities and jobs with greater social and environmental impacts. As we've heard over the last 2 days, foreign direct investment in Vietnam is extremely high, but its connectivity to the domestic private sector is extremely weak, and this needs to change and shift if we're to avoid further deepening of inequality. Second is building Industrial Revolution 4.0 technology and IT infrastructure, data security, and e-government. This will be key to help increase efficiencies of government and the private sector with faster adaptation of Industry 4.0 among Vietnamese firms. It will also enable Vietnam to better utilize domestic data resources for growth. Thirdly, is catalyzing a culture of anticipatory governance, regulations, and services that embrace the pace of technological change and help make Industry 4.0 more inclusive. This includes creating well-defined zones for experimentations, as we've seen in other countries, such as regulatory sandboxes to test and innovate future anticipatory guidance, services, and regulation that will help Industry 4.0 technology-based transformations of existing firms and facilitate the growth of new businesses in sunrise industries, agriculture, and services. Fourthly, is incentivizing what we call development finance sandboxes. That is, a space for experimentation with government seed funding and innovative multi-stakeholder co-financing mechanisms for crowding in private sector investment for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Critical actions for ensuring growth with equality and leaving no one behind include, fifthly, redesigning agile education and life cycle skills development systems that are able to equip Vietnamese, especially youth, girls, women, and vulnerable groups, including ethnic minorities and people with disabilities, with 21st century skills. This is vital to enable them to seize new business opportunities and to adapt to the new streams of work and changes in the nature of jobs. Sixthly, and finally, is reforming the social protection system towards more inclusive coverage and greater benefits. This includes creating innovative policies such as testing universal basic income, especially for people who cannot be reskilled or whose jobs are made redundant. In conclusion, Vietnam has the unique opportunity for crafting a transition to an inclusive industrial revolution 4.0 that generates leaps in productivity and technological transformation, and when accompanied by anticipatory governance, leads to a resilient, sustainable, prosperous Vietnam where no one is left behind. Allow me to wish the participants of this meeting great health, happiness, and prosperity as we approach the new year of the pig. Chúc mừng năm mới. Xin cảm ơn.
Xin cảm ơn chia sẻ rất thú vị của bà Caitlin. Thưa quý vị, và bây giờ là cái thời gian dành cho nghỉ giữa giờ. Ban tổ chức có chuẩn bị tiệc trà phía ngoài hành lang. Xin mời quý vị chúng ta di chuyển đến phía hành lang để chúng ta dùng tiệc trà và nghỉ giải lao dưa. Xin cảm ơn. Nguồn lực phục vụ tăng trưởng bền vững. Nhằm giải quyết vấn đề giới hạn về tài nguyên, nền kinh tế thế giới đang tăng trưởng với 3 tiêu chí: thông minh, bền vững và toàn diện. Điều này đòi hỏi tất cả các chính phủ trên thế giới phải thực hiện các chính sách đúng đắn để xây dựng một nguồn lực hiệu quả với đầy đủ kỹ năng, kiến thức, kinh nghiệm, v.v. Tọa đàm đưa ra những ý tưởng mới cùng với các bài học kinh nghiệm để giải quyết các thách thức về nguồn nhân lực phục vụ phát triển bền vững. Để tăng trưởng bền vững, đòi hỏi phải có một hệ thống giáo dục và đào tạo tốt. Tham gia vào phần thảo luận, ban tổ chức xin trân trọng và kính mời lên sân khấu bà Freeman Eva, Giám đốc Trung tâm Quốc tế của Thụy Điển về đào tạo cho phát triển bền vững, Đại học Uppsala, Thụy Điển. Xin trân trọng kính mời bà. Bà Lê Thị Kim, Giám đốc Dịch vụ khoán việc và cho thuê lại lao động miền Bắc, Tập đoàn Manpower. Ông Moiserongen Yves, Viện Nghiên cứu Phát triển IRD Pháp. Xin trân trọng kính mời ông. Bà Bakuchi Valentina, đại diện phòng Việt Nam của Tổ chức Lao động Quốc tế ILO, chủ tọa phiên tòa thảo luận này. Ban tổ chức xin trân trọng giới thiệu ông Moiserongen Yves, Viện Nghiên cứu Phát triển IRD Pháp, lên điều hành chương trình hội thảo. Xin trân trọng kính mời ông.
Hello, everybody. I wish you first a very good new year, prosperity, good earth. I would like first to thank the organizer of the conference. It is a huge and impressive conference hall, and it is an honor for me to chair this session and to share with you, with us, all ideas on development, sustainability, climate change, industrial revolution. It is also an opportunity for me to understand this wonderful country, Vietnam, because I'm much more a specialist of North African countries. And since yesterday, I met a lot of passionate, interesting people, and I'm sure that we'll have good discussion and that it will continue. So in this session, we will have four interesting presentation. First of all, Freeman Eva, which is director of Swedest, Uppsala University. And the floor is yours to present a presentation on integration of sustainability in higher education, leadership, and pathways. I suggest that every of us has 15 minutes to present, and then that we'll have 5 minutes with the audience to exchange a question or remarks.
Thank you very much. These are working, right? Yes. Dear all organizers and dear all participants, I am very happy to be here. As the presenter said, I am the director of Swedest, Swedish International Center for Education for Sustainable Development at Uppsala University in Sweden. Uppsala University is also very pleased to be able to co-organize or be a supportive organizer of this event. I will talk about integration of sustainable development in higher education, and I will share experiences from Sweden, where this has been done since about 10 years. But let me first talk a bit about the very challenging context to this and the role of education in general and ESD, Education for Sustainable Development specifically, for reaching sustainable development, or at least coming closer to sustainable development. I should also say that apart from the director of Swedest, I'm also adjunct professor at the University of the Sunshine Coast in Australia. And I am to switch, right? Yes. So the context then, the international society has pinpointed education, quality education, as key for reaching the goals in Agenda 2030. So education on the side of other instrument, of course, is key for all of these goals. But education also has its own goal. Goal 4, quality education. There are learning objectives for achieving the SDGs, where education is again a key, which are cognitive, social, emotional, and behavior. And these are specified for each SDG. As I said, SDG 4, that reads quality education, and the target 4.7 within SDG 4 is quality education and learning, integrating sustainable development as content, of course. And in my take, that is a transdisciplinary content, not only single discipline. Having to do, of course, with economic, but primarily ecological and social processes, cultural too. Then it's also about developing teaching methods and environments for teaching and learning, and stimulating transformative learning, that is approaches, critical reflection, and action competence. This should be a process of lifelong learning. Oh, sorry. No. This way, yes, yeah. So I was just talking to this PPP and I didn't move forward, but now I have, okay? So the next one then. The form or forms of ESD, maybe rather. As I already said, ESD, education and learning for sustainable development. When I say ESD, I mean education, the formal education sector, but also learning that happens in companies, in NGOs, in civil society in different ways, with all different actors of society and citizens participating. So it's informal learning and formal education I'm talking about, and for sustainable development. Interdisciplinary and holistic, that is really important. And the take that we have at Swedish, at least, is that education for sustainable development shouldn't be its own subject in school or at the university, but rather be integrated in all other subjects. ESD needs value reflection, reviewing, debating, testing different worldviews, different values systems. Critical thinking and problem solving, super important. Relevance and context sensitivity also. If we want all people to participate in making our development more sustainable, this has to be relevant for all. So focusing personal and also structural, as well as local and global issues, really important. Pluralism in methods, I will come to that later, and student or learner participation and co-creation, as all humans are to be included in this process. Swedest, my center then, is the Center for Research and Development on ESD at Uppsala University. And as such, we are of course engaged, no, not of course, but we are engaged both nationally and internationally in research for and education for the Agenda 2030. Education then again being the key to, one of the keys for the agenda. And we see the content issue of what is to be integrated in higher or other education as being set. The global challenges, or you could also say the 17 goals in Agenda 2030, are wicked problems. That is, these problems are unique. They are hard to predict and solve, hard to conceptualize even. And there we want to offer all stakeholders and actors a research-based learning environment. And a remark on the title of this workshop, this current that we have now. I am myself an economist. I did my PhD in another subject, but I am an economist from the beginning. If I could rename this workshop right now, I would let it end with not sustainable growth, but sustainable development. The reason being that economic growth, as you probably most of you know, is exponential. It's counted exponential, and it's really insensitive of context. And that is not sustainable in my take. Growth is not an objective either in itself. It's a means, possibly, in some parts of the world at least. But what we need is to exchange GDP for a new measure that deals with inequity, absolutely, and ecological sustainability, unsustainability, and ecological degradation, certainly, too. I will skip these research findings from Swedish, but you can find them in my presentation. Maybe I should say that ESD needs to deal with equity and distributional issues, as I just said also. It needs to deal with ecological sustainability, and transformative learning demands active participation and co-creation. So what is at hand is to find ways to include everyone and different groups, different experiences, worldviews, and contexts. The case of Sweden then. Since 2008, Sweden has in its Higher Education Act a paragraph that reads, universities and university colleges shall in all their activities promote sustainable development, meaning the common actually definition of sustainable development, that is current and future generations are ensured a healthy and good environment, economic and social welfare, and equity, which is the goal rather than growth, right, for sustainability. So since 2006 then, all higher education institutions should promote sustainable development in Sweden. This is super important, of course, as my last paragraph there reads. The role of higher education institutions should be taken seriously as we educate the people who are actually going to be a large part of society and where society is going to end up in the next generation. 2016 and 17, the Higher Education Act and this paragraph on sustainable development was evaluated by the Swedish Higher Education Authority, and it chose to focus then, the authority chose to focus only on education. It could have been a research outreach, but this was only on education, and not ESD, that I'm working with, but rather sustainable development as mostly as content, but we also got it to be some kind of a bit about form too, pedagogical, didactical forms in education. I was part of the board that the Swedish Higher Education Authority chose, board of experts and assessors, some 10 of us we were. And all higher education institutions were asked to write a self-evaluation based on certain evaluation criteria that we had drawn up. And us as assessors were appointed, yes, and we did an evaluation based on a self-evaluation that all institutions were, or all universities were asked to do. We made one report each for each university, and also wrote a report on general findings and recommendations. We graded the process of the university where they were in the process of actually integrating sustainable development in education. We didn't have any stages, we didn't have any absolute facts or absolute things that you had to attain, but where in the process of actually integrating sustainable development in education that you are. Either you got the grade, the university has a well-developed process for integrating sustainable development in education, or this process needs to be developed. And we find that all universities in Sweden, even the small, really specified university colleges, could give examples of courses or programs where sustainable development was included in the teaching. But most of them could not present us with objectives, overarching objectives for integrating sustainability in education, and they also lacked a systematic follow-up and a long-term follow-up of sustainability in education. And only 12 out of the Swedish 47 university colleges got the higher grade. We put this a lot to have to do with the leadership of, the leadership in Sweden, the Swedish government, and also the leadership of each university and university college. So I will end. I don't know, how am I with time?
Yes, you have time.
Sorry?
You have 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, so I will quickly take you through the recommendations we had to each university or university college, and the last slide is to the government. And I will only take up some of these, and I hope you can then maybe take part of these slides in another way. Well, each university or university college that are serious with actually implementing sustainable development in education needs to set clear objectives and make sure that these are followed up in a systematic way. It would also be really good to create an internal organization for promoting sustainable development at the university, and with a specific responsibility for actually being responsible for a sustainable development and its inclusion in education, and also actually research and outreach. Otherwise, it's easy that it's forgotten after an evaluation such as this one. Knowledge and awareness and commitment to sustainable development in recruiting process of university vice chancellors and university boards in leading staff is super important. That was a recommendation we gave both to the higher education institution and to the government. because the government is actually appointing vice chancellors, but other leading staff at the university itself recruits. We also made a recommendation that the higher education institution and the responsible people for integrating sustainable development in education should stress that education for sustainable development means both developing the subject area, the transdisciplinary subject area, and forms of education, inclusive, participatory forms, where the student or the learner is really active in his or her own learning. Okay, so a few recommendations to the Swedish government. Well, we saw that when we evaluated the universities and university colleges, they happened to start a process of integrating sustainable development into education the very year when the evaluation started. So it helps to follow up, even though we have a law saying that all universities absolutely need to do this, it helps to follow up. And it created a lot of new measures and changes at the university levels. Which one should I end with? Yeah, though, of course, all universities, individual lecturers also, other actors share the responsibility for furthering sustainable development. Only the Swedish government, we said, can create a structure that lasts, that is funded, not least, and that embraces all university and university colleges. A structure, not only the law, but also a follow-up and evaluation structure, and a meeting place for lecturers and university leaders to be creative in developing sustainable development in education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Eva, for this presentation. In the conferences in the morning, we point out the fact that change mindset, rise awareness was a key question to sustainability. So your presentation shows how an institution tried to implement, to support sustainability in the curricula. So maybe I will take some questions from the audience. If you have, don't hesitate. We have 5 minutes. If you don't ask questions, I have many questions, but I don't want to speak alone or to ask myself. Yes, please. Okay, maybe. Sorry, can you wait for the micro because of the translation?
I have 2 questions. The first one is about the recommendations. The slides went pretty fast, so I'm not so sure whether there is a specific recommendation that the university makes it mandatory that students take some kind of test on a sustainable development or whatever, however you want to define it, in order to complete a particular degree, because that actually will guarantee that whatever you are doing will work, because we never know how much students have learned. And the second question will be, just out of curiosity, whether if we want to decide a course on governance for sustainable development, what would be your recommendations?
Thank you very much for those questions. The first, no, we didn't recommend that each student should take, this was the first, right, a test. No, we didn't recommend that. I would love for all the students to take such a test. I mean, there are, the funny thing is, you could say in Sweden, that first of all, we have the Higher Education Act actually saying that they are mandatory, they have to, all the universities have to promote sustainable development in all their activities. They really don't, not all of them, as you saw. Some is integrated, but that is up to, that is very often due to that you have a certain teacher that really is engaged in these issues. But But there are also learning objectives within this, especially for teachers and engineers and others. But these are not followed up. So we did recommend a stronger follow-up from the government of the university's activities. But I don't think we are there yet for every student to take a test, even though, we also discussed within the evaluator panel whether we should try to implement a first mandatory semester for all university students, where sustainable development, critical thinking, learning to participate in your own learning and so forth would be a crucial part. But it wasn't really the time for that yet, sadly. The other question was, my mind is not working as it should, I think. What was the other question? Yeah. No. Please. Yeah, a specific course in government. Yeah, I couldn't comment so much on that. Others would be better off commenting. But, I mean, I can say that there are different kind of leadership for sustainable development courses and initiatives, not least my colleague there, Neil Powell, who will speak this afternoon, have been thinking a lot about leadership for sustainable development. We also have a upcoming master program where this will be a topic, international master program. But mandatory for all is very hard. You could, of course, at any university, in any subject area, develop such a course. You're free to do that in Sweden. Universities are hesitant to be governed by the state too much and the government. So they say, we do free research and free education. And sustainable development is met very positive by some, like democracy, which all Swedish universities are working towards and not against. And I think sustainable development will become such a topic later.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question in the audience? No? So maybe I'll take the opportunity to ask one of my 5 questions, but I will insist. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Please, can you give a micro to on the left? Yeah.
Thank you for your presentations. I'm Linh from an NGO Vietnam. I'm work for environment. But I have a question for you. We are talking about the education for sustainable development, and I would love to ask about the open educational resource. This movement to promote the open educational resource so that the student can access the resource openly and free. So I would like to ask you if Sweden support this, and what is your perspective on this? Thank you.
A very good question, thank you. Well, my country was, until a few years ago, had free university education for all. Now we have started to charge people outside of the EU, so we don't have that anymore. We have a lot of open access publishing of research results. We have also online courses, but most of them demand that you pay a fee. Yes, I'm very much for open access to education and research. And we were many who didn't like feeing education in Sweden.
One last. So maybe just a question about the influence you have on other countries. What is your diagnostic, and maybe could be your recommendation if you have worked with a specific country?
Yes, Sweden is known to be one of the leaders of sustainable development, right, in the world. and also then of education for sustainable development. I just want to point out that, as you saw, only 12 of our 47 universities really engage in this in a good way right now. I think it will be better now when the evaluation process has started. In schools, you can see super good examples. Swedest has, as being the national coordinator of ESD in Sweden, 2016 to 19, because those are the years that the UN Decade for ESD has been replaced by the Global Action Program on ESD. So UNESCO is leading that, and our government has appointed us, the national coordinators. We also are a gap key partner with UNESCO for implementing ESD for teachers and trainers. So that is globally. We have been working with many countries. The best influence that we have had is when we work together with no matter what country actually, but for example, if it's the formal education sector, we work with students, teachers, leaders of universities, and also Ministry of Education, all of those together and let them sit together. And really we have methods, tools to further ESD, but we cannot do that without their contextual knowledge. And so when we work together, I think we have the best influence.
Thank you very much. Maybe a quick last question and we'll...
Quick question. One of the goals of the sustainable development is the human or capacity building. And I wonder about Sweden case. What do you have for in-service training or professional development for teachers at all levels? Can you share how do the government or the Ministry of Education and Training support the in-service training or professional development for teachers at all levels?
Yes. Very shortly, the government or the Ministry of Education does not support that, and very sad to say. And we have that. This is mainly what we do internationally: help teachers have a larger capacity for teaching ESD, teaching sustainable development. In Sweden, we just got small mission to do that at our own university for teacher trainers. And also actually at Uppsala University, as in many universities in Sweden, not at schools at all, I would say. In that case, you can actually, if you are really want it yourself, you can access some education if you're a teacher. But otherwise, there is, you touch upon it in pedagogical training for teachers, but it's not anything that is supported by the ministry.
Thank you very much for your answers. Now I suggest that we go to the second presentation, Barcucci Valentina, which is the representative of International Labour Organization in Vietnam. We'll speak about skills development and sustainable growth, reflections and employment policy implications. So Valentina, the floor is yours for 15 minutes.
Thank you, Jean-Yves. Waiting for my presentation. In the meantime, I would like to thank the distinguished audience, the organizers, and my fellow panelists for having the ILO join this interesting, timely, and very relevant discussion. My name is Valentina Barcucci. I'm the labor economist at the ILO country office for Vietnam. And this morning, in the next 10 minutes or so, I would like to share some reflections around the topic of skills development and sustainable growth. And because I am among academics, I know the first to define new terms. Particularly when we are talking about a word that is so uber used, like sustainable. So in my experience, sustainable is basically something that does not create problems along the way. And when we look at sustainable growth in particular, the word has come to take two groups of meanings. One related to the quantity of growth. So we think about growth that is strong and durable. And then a second group of meaning, which is related to the quality of that growth. And I couldn't quite find a way to summarize it because it's an umbrella of different meanings. So I'll summarize it with a question. Do we want growth for the sake of it, or do we want growth because we aim at building a more prosperous society, a better future for our children, and preserve our planet? Now, we know that the quantity and the quality are correlated. We know that they are mutually reinforcing, but unfortunately, there is no automatic link between quantity and quality. And this is something that has been already mentioned today a few times by other presenters. Now, we can probably say that in the last 2.5 decades, we have accepted that quality and quantity are two sides of the same coin. And it was here I've dug up from the archives of UNDP. This is a graph from the Human Development Report of 1996. And in fact, we see that the quality of the image is not very good. But basically, we have on the two axes, we have GDP growth and human development. And we see that, sorry, can you hear me if I walk away from the microphones? We see that countries that have focused in the previous, so this is 1996, countries that had focused in the previous 30 years on human development only, or on economic growth only without balancing well the two, had experienced some spells of growth, but it had eventually faded, whereas those that had managed to coordinate policy for economic growth and policy for skills development, for example, had actually reached durable and sustainable growth. So if we fast forward by 20 years or more, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read UNCTAD's World Investment Report for 2018. It came out at the end of last year. And there we see that basically it's almost unthinkable today to have an international investment agreement that does not have provisions for labor, for example, provisions that make sure that the investment that is expected to ensue the international agreement will be socially responsible. Whereas back in 1996, it was a new topic. And that report from the UNDP was one of the first ones that was trying to make the business case for human development. Nowadays, we have the SDG framework, as has been mentioned several times already today, that encapsulates very well, in a very comprehensive manner, the multiple facets that together make quality of growth. And interestingly enough, at least I find it extremely interesting, skills, like it was mentioned by Eva before, is not just chiefly mentioned or taken care of by SDG 4, but it's really a prerequisite of so many of the 17 SDGs. So let's look more in detail into growth and skills. Remember the chart that I showed before from the Human Development Report, and the countries that were up on the right top of the quadrant were those that had managed to balance a focus on quantity of growth and a focus on quality. There is an upcoming ILO research that looks at the evolution of what we call integrated employment policy framework. And that is considered to be the most advanced and the most effective approach to policy making to guarantee solid growth while always keeping an eye on the quality side. And the study finds that really Korea, you remember it was at the top of the chart I showed before, was really one of the pioneers of this approach, because it had basically, and the other countries that were around Korea in the chart had the intuition to put in place industrial policy that was squarely pro-growth and ensure job creation as part of it, and at the same time coordinate in a very systematic manner skills development policy together so that the benefits of growth would be spread across society, and so that the private sector could find on the labor market the skills that were needed to further and to achieve basically the economic growth that industrial policy wanted to achieve in the first place. I'm stuck. Okay. So why is this all relevant to Vietnam of today and of tomorrow? I won't repeat that Vietnam has experienced impressive growth and an impressive pace of industrialization and integration into the global economy. I will simply show, so that we keep it in mind, on the right top of the slide, a small graph that looks at paid employment. This is an indicator of the labor force survey from the General Statistics Office. So we can use it as a proxy of wage employment. Now, wage employment has been mentioned already today, that is considered a relatively good, relatively better type of employment compared to other types. And we see how it has grown, even just between 2009 and 2017. It has grown of almost 10%. This other chart, instead, looks at it comes from a recent study from the ILO on skills and the future of work in ASEAN. And it shows the workforce composition across different global value chains. And we see that Vietnam is represented across many of these. And the challenge, though, that we face is that although integration into global value chains has brought more of the relatively better type of employment, we see that in the chart there are gray areas and there are red areas. Now, the segment of the global value chains that is performed in Vietnam tends to be still around the gray areas. Those are the low-skilled areas. At that level of the value chain, businesses compete on cost, which means that the chance that employers will be willing to invest into social upgrading is lower. The opportunity is to move up into the red parts, into the higher skilled areas, which come with more sustainable jobs. It's also, again, it's a matter of quality and of quantity, again, because moving up into the higher skilled parts of the value chains implies a higher level of productivity, usually. And within sector productivity is really one of the avenues for further economic growth for Vietnam, given that other avenues, such as the shift from farm to factory and labor force expansion, these are, let's say, the marginal gains from these two drivers of growth is now relatively limited. So we need to look into new avenues. In the interest of time, I'll probably skip some of the slides. I don't know how I'm doing, but I feel like we're getting close to the end, so we'll skip these. I will simply show these two graphs briefly, because we cannot talk about labor market in Vietnam and skills and not discuss the informal sector and vulnerable employment. Interestingly, these graphs come from a data set that is different from, I think we've missed a slide, sorry. This one, okay. Okay, so we'll look at this slide and the other one at the same time. I think when I got stuck with the remote, we skipped the slide. So this is a very important one because it brings all the discussion around coordination between industrial policy and skills development down to the micro level. So why do we argue that skills development has such a strong power to foster social inclusion? These are the results of 40, actually more, but at least 40 different studies from the ILO ran between 2012 and 2016, roughly, in as many countries, on the transition from school to work. And these are not, this is not the whole sample, but the results were extremely robust across countries. And we see Vietnam as part of the results charted here. This particular graph looks at returns to education. It basically shows how there is an expected increment in earnings to every additional year of education. And we include vocational education as well in here. So this shows that basically there is a return in economic terms. It will be, of course, a very narrow mandate to look at, to judge quality of a job only on the basis of earnings. But the same body of literature from the ILO, a whole research series, found that there is a correlation between years of schooling and stability of employment, for example, and a satisfaction about one's jobs. So there are indicators on that are more strictly related to the quality of employment and to the happiness that comes with a certain job. Now, if we go back to the other final slide, this one, this is a completely different data set, and this is entirely focused on Vietnam, and we find basically the complementary results. On the left of the slide, we have the share of formal and informal employment by levels of completed education, and we see that, unsurprisingly, informal employment is overrepresented among the employed population with no education at all or only primary education completed. And to complete the picture, on the right-hand side of the slide, we see the share of formal and informal employment by occupation, and again, we see an overrepresentation of informal workers among the occupations that are more low-skilled. To conclude, I won't mention all of these. I'll just mention the two that do not come up automatically from the slides already. One point is that skills do not exist in a vacuum, and this is something that hasn't been mentioned today, so maybe it's worth that I bring in also this point. Even if we have the best possible skilled labor force, it is still up to the employer to utilize those skills in an appropriate way. And this is important to give the right incentive to workers to further their education and skills development. And it's also important to get an efficiency gain and a productivity gain out of the investment into skills of everyone in society, at the individual level and at more the national level. And finally, and here I conclude, I think it's really important to remain positive towards the future, because the future of any given country's labor market is a choice. Remember the chart that we saw at the beginning from the 1996 Human Development Report? Countries that chose to focus only on economic growth, for example, the resource-rich countries, and not enough on skills development, chose to do so. The Koreas chose to pursue industrial policy and at the same time job creation and skills development. Now, we can argue that at the time, in the 60s, there was not a lot of information about to make that choice. But today we don't have that excuse anymore. There is enough information out there for Vietnam to choose and pursue the future of work that the country wants. Thank you very much, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you very much, Valentina, for this very interesting presentation. You gave a lot of information, and I was very pleased that you insist on the importance of informal sector related to skills education, because I think it is one of the important challenges for developing skills in Vietnam. Once again, we have 5 minutes to take some questions from the audience. So please feel free. Yes, we have one.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I'm Hoa from Green Hub, Vietnam. So I see in your presentation talk a lot about the policy promote high education, good skill, yeah. And I wonder for ILO, you have any policy promote the green jobs? Can say like green jobs that people working in environmental protection, conservation, social responsibility. So any priorities or any policy that ILO concern about promote green jobs? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely. And it's certainly one of our areas of expansion we are looking into for in Vietnam in particular. I would say that just to simplify and to give you a comprehensive but quick answer, there are two areas of policy focus around environment and jobs. One is to consider how jobs need to change because of the impact of environmental change. Think, for example, of agriculture and the new skills, the new abilities that are required to deal with too much water, too much rain, or lack thereof, for example. The second is, in terms of green jobs, is to look at the new jobs that can be created. So the opportunities for job creation related to green infrastructure, for example. So related to an environmentally friendly way of changing our economy and in our cities and our societies. So these are the two areas in which mostly the ILO work on green jobs is focused.
Thanks a lot. I've seen another person here.
Good morning. I'm Ha. I have the question for the panel because I deeply concerned the slide unskilled and low skilled labor, because we sustainable development, we not focus only on the high skilled labor but also the low skilled labor, and they are very easy to expose the vulnerable. So the question is the vocational training for the unskilled and become low skilled and become the high skilled labor is not so far enough in Vietnam, and so the panel can share the experience and the policy of the industrialized developed country to training on job or create the skill, building the skill for the labor can adapt, more adaptable with the trend of the job, with the new technology, something like that. That is my question. Maybe you share the experience and policy for the on-job training and training focus on the unskilled and low-skilled labor. Thank you.
Okay, it's a we could talk for probably 1 year about about this, but thank you very much for the question, because it encapsulates a lot of different issues that that are relevant to pretty much all the presentations that I've heard today. I'm thinking how I can give you the most ILO contribution to the answer. Probably, okay, I'll first address the part about skills upgrading in the informal sector. This is an essential point, an essential priority for the country. This is not just the ILO who says it. Our partners in Molisa are giving the same message. We are discussing the same messages. There are ILO studies showing that there are the first signs in Vietnam of job substitution because of technology adoption. And again, this is not per se this is not a negative trend, right? It's a trend that needs to be welcomed and prepared for. But what we have noticed is that while in sectors such as textile and automotive, the overall number of jobs has remained the same, but there has been a shift between in occupations. So we find a lower number of craftsmen and trade and say workers at the level of household enterprises, and more technicians. So these are still relatively low, in both cases relatively low skilled, but we are implying a shift from the informal sector into the formal sector. So how do we accompany workers in that shift so that we don't end up with an undereducated labor force? So a labor force that is still performing their jobs, but does not have the requirements because they're coming from the informal sector and they don't have formal education. But this is really through specific programs. It can be done in different ways. There could be one way is to join forces between private sector and public sector through private partnership, because it is partially a form of social assistance and towards social inclusion to provide informal workers with more formal qualifications that are recognized by industry, for example. But at the same time, it's more and more recognized that the role of the private sector into finishing up basically the job and making sure that the workers are fully trained for the specific job is extremely important. Now, to conclude, you mentioned about how can we make sure that skills that are provided by the vocational education training system, so like we're talking now about more formal skills provision, how can we make sure that those skills are in line with with the new developments on the labor market? And that, from the perspective of the ILO, is very beautifully done through tripartite governance of skill systems. There are extremely advanced skill systems in the world. They're based on the beauty of the work of the tripartite partners together. Why? Because the government, on the one hand, has the overall responsibility to provide society with strong and relevant education, and at the same time to also have a well-prepared labor force to fuel economy. Employers are those who have who basically have the incentive to make sure that they can find on the labor market the best graduates. And workers' organizations are those who have the interest in making sure that the type of skills development that each worker receives is not just for that person to be able to access that one specific job, but it's really skills development that opens up opportunities for that worker to find decent jobs across even across particular industries or sectors. So they have all three the right incentives to work together and keep the skills system up to date with labor market needs and very focused on the needs of the individuals as well. Sorry, this was a really long answer.
Thank you for your excellent answer. Eva, you want?
I will try to be very short and maybe answer from another perspective. Sustainability is really about whether we want to continue living on this planet or not. So it's not something that you can choose to educate yourself in, at least not in the long run, or we will fail as a species, and I don't think most of us want that. So education for sustainable development is not at all to try to see exactly what skills are needed today to fill certain positions at the labor market or to create economic growth. For me, that is not the central aim with education for sustainable development. Rather, it is to create wise, active, people who can participate in their society, no matter how old they are. This can start at a very early age, no matter from which culture they are, but in relation to their own context. And no matter if you're a PhD or if you will be a worker of some kind, you can still be a wise person taking part and responsibility, creating conditions in your society for sustainability. So that is a much wider take, I guess.
Thank you very much. Maybe you wanted to add something, but anyway, your presentation will focus on that aspect, so I will give you I will give you the floor right now for, yes, 10, 15 minutes. We have some time, so don't hesitate to speak. You speak from here or there?
Okay. So, thank you. Thank you very much. This is my pleasure to be invited here to share our experience and perspective from Member Group Vietnam and Global Member Group about the human capital and training policy and training experience to upskill the professional skills into the human age, digital age. Since 2008, my Member Group Vietnam also already have the memo of understanding with the authority, Ministry of Labor, about our commitment to share the knowledge and research on human capital management with the purpose of add our value to labor market in Vietnam. So today, in regards to the upskilling, the soft skill, because I will share with you why we need to talk about the needs of upskill in this era. So first, all right, this one, second, all right. We have general view on the world of work in the digital age. You can see in the slides, this is the future forces of work. The recession subsided, and many expected that the world would return to business as usual. However, it hasn't happened. It's certainly that the business environment is increasingly less stable and hard to predict. And in 2011, Manpower Group identified that the world would enter the new era, human age, in which talent would become a key economic differentiator. And there are 4 macro factors which is driving the business. This is the shifting demographics, and because in the organization there are nowadays there are grouping by genders, by generation, from baby boomers, millennials, Generation Y, and the employees now, they have different individual choice to select their job and to approach in their career journey. At the same time, the customer, they also have different choice, and we call it customer sophistication. And especially because now we enter the digital world, we have new way to get the work done by technological revolution. You can see we have digitalization, big data, automation, AI, private cloud, and public cloud, machine learning, etc. This is a new way and very convenient for us, for employees, to get their work done. So nowadays it changed. The top 10 most in-demand roles globally, you can see in the slide. Now we talk about the most in-demand is skilled trades. For example, electricians, welders, mechanics. The second most in-demand is sales representative for B2B, B2C contact centers, and engineers, and then drivers, technicians, IT, accounting and finance professionals, office support, and manufacturing. This is our recent research. And due to the automation, there are some functions likely to change in headcount in the next 2 years. The decreased headcount in administrative and office, they are influenced by automation. And finance and accounting, you can see the decrease 7% for administrative and office, and 3% for finance and accounting. Human resource, no change, because we are still owe the system and create the policy. So automation not threat very much to human resource. Manufacturing and production still increase the headcount. Frontline and customer facing IT still increase the headcount. This is the global, and now in Vietnam, the overall, I would like to provide you the overall total workforce is 57 million, while unemployment only 2.3%, but for English proficiency, only 5% of the total workforce can be fluent in English. This also a weakness of the workforce. But first, I would like to share with you the strength in our Vietnamese workforce. First, we have the young and populous, hardworking for sure, and keen to learn. Young, always keen to learn, and tech savvy and creative. However, we have some lack. Actually, the youth lack of working discipline, lack of language proficiency. Only 5% in the workforce can speak English, and almost 8%, according to our recent research, 8% can speak like other language. And due to we are very young, and we lack of experience, and especially lack of soft skill. This is the reason why we need to upskill, to upgrade the skill into the professional in the new age, the human age. You see, this is our research, our survey for skill gap. Only 11% consider is high skill, 40% is medium skilled, and 48% non-skilled. This will impact the figure show us that it will impact to the employment trend in the digital age. Recently, we found the emergence of early tech adopters. This is a small but very significant group. Nowadays, candidates, they have more than 3 ways to approach the job and to get the job search. For example, smartphone apps, they have the virtual job fair, they have websites, online tests, and video interviews, different ways using technologies to approach the job. And we call this group is early technologies adopters. And especially they use social media ads to search their job. And you can see here 73% of early HR technology adopter click on social media ads. This is the figure show us that it provides us the insight of the new rates on HR search job that using technologies. Okay, there are different ways to get the job, to find the job. For example, in-person interview, general online search, ad on social media, using smartphone apps, attending job fair, and also the virtual job fair, chat on employer websites, video interview, text message, even text message from companies. We have, like nowadays many organizations, they set up the call center from the human resource department to respond directly online with the candidate. This is also the very useful way to approach the candidate and like to do pre-interview with the candidates. And also we have virtual job fair, we have game or skill tests, online tests, voice search, many ways using technologies in the digital age. That and also we in Vietnam we also have like inter-government agreements that affecting Vietnamese workforce. You can see like AFTA, Asian Free Trade Area, provides us 20,000 jobs by 2020, and AEC provide 14 million jobs by 2025. Many ways to get a job, so it's provide more opportunities for candidates to get the work, and they give them more choice to find a suitable job and decide which one is suitable for them in their career journey. Also, free mobility ability nowadays also give employee more chance to get the work. For example, among Asian, there are 8 sectors allowing free mobility for young workforce, like doctors, dentists, nurses, engineers, architects, auditors, observers, and tour guides. Actually, the more job opportunities be given to the candidates, the harder find the talent for organization. So recently, we also talk much about the talent shortage in the organization as well. In the next slide, I will share some point of view about the talent shortage. You can see that nowadays with the technological revolutions and more jobs appeared in this era, the needs of skills also very different. In the past, for example, in 10 years later, in the past 10 years, we employed the translator and interpreter as one skill in the company, as one job holder in the company. But nowadays, almost all the employee required to have the language skills. So it not become a job title anymore. It's like a needs of every employee. So you can see that this is one example to show us that the skills nowadays is different, especially in 10 years later when we talk about the digital age. Some skills that now are considered for leadership when we employ the leader, maybe in our research in 10 years or 15 years later, those skills become like normal criteria of the candidates. And in Manpower Group, we consider skill is a new currency in the digital age. We talk about the soft skill and hard skill. Hard skill is something like technical, but soft skill, we talk about the human strength. That in the next slides, I will share with you the definition of the human strength. Okay, human strength stand out in the digital age. For example, communication, collaborate, problem solving, organization, customer service, leadership, management, relationship building, curiosity, and many characteristics that we consider as a human strength that automation cannot replace. The best plan is we use we find the candidate who has soft skills, technical and digital skills in one, and also it shows nowadays, since we are looking for almost that kind of talent it become a big challenge for organization to find match candidates for the job. You can see in the slide, 29% in our survey, 29% of employers say applicants lack either the hard skill or human strengths. It's very hard for organization to find a mixture, a mix in one candidate, soft skill, hard skill, and digital skill. So 27% of employers say if applicants lack either the hard skill or human strengths that need to fulfill their roles. And 20% of employers say that they lack, it's hard to find the candidate who has the matching experience to the job criteria. That's the needs. That's the reason why we are talking. We are now here today to talking about the training needs and training policy in Vietnam. So what employers are doing today? In our survey, 54% of employers choose to provide additional training and development. It also shows the environment of labor market in Vietnam, where we almost of the workforce is young, and on the first side, the youthful workforce making an attractive country for foreign investment, but the other side, they need also they need also the training for them, like additional training and develop the youth, the young workforce to become a skill. Because in the last slide, we already show you that there are only 11% of total workforce are considered highly skilled, and 49% are unskilled. And in our survey, there are 36% of employers are adjusting educations and experience required to fill roles, while 54% prefer to provide additional training. It shows the needs and the needs of training in the organizations. For training, we see the strategic cooperation between the government, the businesses, and the training institutes, schools. Yeah, of course, because we see that it's the need that the government labor. When we build up the training policy, we need to consider the government factor. If the orientation should be very consistent in the labor market, and also we have to consider the alignment with business strategy of the company in each department, especially in Manpower Group Vietnam. When we consult to our clients, we put our effort to analyze the business strategy of the company. That factor influence much to the training policy for short-term purpose and long-term objective. And also we consider the impact of global market trend. By building the training policy, we also consider the objective, put the clear objective and how to set them. In Manpower Group Vietnam, we are talking about objective. Normally, mainly we're talking about the upskilling for digital age demand, because in the changing world of work, there appears new skills and many unpredicted skills in the digital world. So the most important we are talking is we train to our employees, train to our candidates to have the capability to be trained and to adjust themselves and to learn about the new skill. In Member Group Vietnam, we call it learnability for candidates and employees. And by setting the training policy, we base on the current trainers' qualification and based on current technological platform of each company. Some example on our detailed plan, concrete plan for upskilling the local workforce in digital industry. For example, we support public employment service center in training their staff. There are almost 100 centers nationwide with almost 4,000 staff will be trained by Manpower Group trainers. We also providing the training course to the, we have the memorandum with different vocational schools, university and college to provide the training courses on soft skill training, and also consult and provide the communication skill directly with the job seekers when we engage directly with the job seeker over our websites, our social media tools. Several activities listed here that we provide soft skill training and career orientation to vocational schools, universities, colleges nationwide, like vocational school Ho Chi Minh City, Ho Chi Minh City University of Science, Hanoi Open University, and Ho Chi Minh City Open University, Hanoi University of Science and Technology, and etc. We in Manpower Group Vietnam, we also have the educational fund to providing to the educational institutes to encourage students on their learning of on their trainings, on their learnability and skill improvement. Okay, thank you very much. I hope that you enjoy some figures and some survey from Manpower Group Vietnam in labor market, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this excellent presentation. You give us very good news. Don't be afraid of digital age. It creates jobs, it opens opportunities, and of course it needs to increase skills all lifelong. So based on this excellent news, maybe you have some questions. We can take 5 minutes before the last presentation. Yes, please, on the left.
Thank you. I have learned quite a lot from the last two presentations, and I just have the general question is whether you could explain a little bit, maybe you have said it already, but maybe you could say it again, like in 2 sentences or 3 sentences, what you mean by the relationship between the government, I think there is this business partners and training agencies. Am I correct?
Yes.
And you talk about, both of you seem to be talking about like this kind of triangular relationship or tripartite. And it occurs to me because this morning I was listening to one of the presenters saying something about the fact that foreign investment was a major sector in Vietnam, right, driving growth. And then the comment that followed was that too bad that it was not highly connected to the domestic sector. Okay, no figures given, but that's the comment. And when listening to you, it occurred to me that, for example, why would we want to train people and provide them skills to work in the foreign direct investment sector when that sector is not particularly connected with anything domestically? This would be one example, right? Because that's the role of the government. The government has said that, okay, that's our plan. but in fact, it doesn't seem to be like very useful. So what's your vision of the government's policy as a partner?
Okay, thank you. So the first question, talking about the strategic cooperation between the government, businesses, and school, educational organizations, right? From the organization's point of view, when we build up the training policy to employees, we have to think of the orientation that provided by the government to the labor market. And because the training policy cannot last for 1 year or 1 month, but the training policy is expected to last for 5 years, for short term and long term. So it's necessary, very much necessary, to consider the orientation that local government want to lead the labor market, because there are two factors will influence much to labor markets. First, the orientation of the government and also the global trends. The second thing is global trends that we can only predict but out of control. So at the meantime of considering the global trends, the business nature, we also have to consider the orientation of the government. And that's why we expect, from our view, we expect that we engage the government more closely in in building the training to the employee, to make it more practical and close to the labor market.
Working together is the key. So please, short question.
Yes, good morning. My name is Bak Tan Singh from Vietnam Institute for Science, Technology and Innovation. So I have a question to ILO. As you see that we are moving now from what Klaus Schwab saying that from capitalism to talentism, which means that we build our more on the talentism. So in the context of what you just mentioned from the other speaker about the ASEAN talent mobility among the ASEAN member countries, and the current trend that some startup from Vietnam tend to move to go to Singapore. So what is your policy recommendation for ILO to government? How can we deal with this kind of issue? Thank you.
Okay. I suggest that we focus on the presentation and maybe we'll have a general discussion.
Affected by climate change? Has it an impact on your relationships with your husband or your wife? Yes? I think for most of us, the answer would be no. And I think that the reason is that we probably all belong to the international, urban and educated middle or upper class, and we live in modern cities. I may, of course, suffer myself from a warmer summer in the south of France during my holidays, but I just have to switch on the air condition and forget it. And if it doesn't really affect my relationship with my wife, except if she wants to switch off the air condition and start for an argument. But let's turn to the reality of the major part of the world population. Are these people affected by climate change? Has it an impact on their relation with their family? In that case, the response will be undoubtedly yes. And it is the kind of question we had, my colleague and me, when we start to study the relation between gender and climate change in Morocco. The study was published in French and fueled the dialogues during the COP22 in Marrakesh in 2016. I tried to give you some information. Sorry, I have problem. Yes. No, okay, it doesn't matter. So I'll try to give you some information on the subject and try to draw lessons for Vietnam. I present first the subject, pointing out some academic challenges, then give examples on how climate change affects the communities and therefore gender relation. I conclude on the importance of gender relation to portray mitigation strategies. So gender and climate change nexus is quite challenging for scholars because it is by nature multidisciplinary. On one side, you have science, climatologists, physicists, ecologists, biologists gathered in international IPCC, and they use complex modeling to analyze and predict CO2 concentration, warming effects, rise of sea levels, etc. They have a strong legitimacy with mathematical tools and macro and predictive perspectives. And on the other side, you have humanities, sociology, anthropology, economics, gender studies, geography, and all these social sciences are more in the speculative sphere and use more soft concepts than predictable certainty. And humanities are also embedded in local dynamics and use a micro perspective. So working together is very challenging. The other aspect is the strong normative dimension of both climate change and gender study. The researchers engaged in the two domains of research don't want only to understand the word, but very often they want to change it and sometimes to save it. So the analysis keeps from the question, what is the reality, to what should be the reality? And the mix between a positive, neutral approach and advocacy perspective may be very confusing. So to understand gender and climate change nexus, we need research and researchers who are able to go out of their conventional subject and able to engage a dialogue with other disciplines. One of the challenges is to articulate macro analysis and the micro knowledge at the community level. So concerning, concerning the impact of the climate change, we may distinguish general impacts and sectoral impacts. General impacts depends on location. On that map, you can see the change in agriculture productivity, and you see that it can be very good for a lot of countries, mainly in the north part of the hemisphere. But if you look at Vietnam here and Morocco here, the situation is not so good. Morocco and Vietnam can be considered both as climate change hotspots. Morocco is a very arid country with low rainfall. In Morocco, average temperatures are expected to rise between 2 and 5 degrees by the end of this century, while rainfall is predicted to decline from 20 to 30%. So the main problem for Morocco will be warming effects and the scarcity of water resources. But Morocco suffers also from floods and sometimes extreme events. Vietnam is also one of the countries that will be most affected by climate change because of its deltas, floodplains, extensive coastline. And if the sea level reaches 1 meter, it will inundate 11% of the population in Vietnam and 7% of agricultural land. So it can be a very serious problem. Climate change impacts the population in all countries, but it impacts is different on the different groups, communities, minorities, social classes, and it affects mainly those that are most reliant on natural resources. The impact is higher for those who have less capacity to respond to natural hazards, droughts, landslides, floods, hurricanes, and also for the poorest and those that have an equal participation in decision-making processes. The fact is that women represent the majority of these categories. Women are poorer than men. They earn 30 to 80% of what men earn. They face higher risks. They suffer from unequal participation in decision-making. They are more often victims of unemployment. They are less educated. 2/3 of illiterates in the world are women. And they contribute less to climate-related policies. They own between 10 or 20% of the land, but represent half of the rural labor force. In a recent research on use of the meteorology data, gender is the most discriminative variable. So who is using meteorology data? It's mainly men. Women are also exposed to climate change in different ways. For example, more poverty means less probability for girls to go to school. More poverty may increase the work in the domestic sphere and decrease time devoted to culture education. Less employment may delay the decision to get married for youngsters. So generally speaking, climate change increases the tension, the difficulties, the constraints, the risk, the uncertainty, the insecurity, and then investment grows. And the tension in gender relations increase because they are often a damper in social tensions. It means that when there is problem, extra charge is put on women's shoulders. Climate change has a lot of sectoral impact. For example, food production. Warming effects or saltwater intrusion, declining biodiversity, plant disease, decreased crop yields. Climate change can also destroy accumulated capital because of flooding, of droughts. They may destroy the road infrastructures. In Vietnam, the acidification of the ocean destroys the habitat of fish, while the region suffers already from pollution and overfishing. Climate change increases also water scarcity. It is true in Morocco, but also in Vietnam. In Morocco, not all households have access to water, and the women are often responsible for supplying water from the village water well. Less water means more time to reach water. And one of my friends in Morocco said to me that he has to pump water so deeply for its farms, and it costs so much energy and so much fuel that rural activity is not anymore profitable. Another important topic is sexual abuses. Natural disaster, for example, destroy the usual condition of working and living. It may raise aggression against vulnerable people as women and children. They face higher risk of sexual abuse during and after natural disasters than before. Last example, capacity to escape extreme events. Social cultural norms can limit women from having the skills necessary to escape or to avoid hazards. Swimming, climbing trees to escape rising water level. Dress codes also, or their responsibility for small children, can restrict their mobility when they face extreme events. And the research shows that women are more victims than men during extreme events. There's another sectoral impact on health, energy. To conclude, I want to mention the role of women in adaptation. The Communities have always used their knowledge to mitigate disaster and transmit them through education. This includes agriculture techniques, food preservation, water management, construction, use of natural resources. They have elaborated know-how to mitigate the negative effects of climate change, and women can be at the first front to find solutions for adaptation because they play an important role in natural resource management, for example. So they are agents of change because of their direct involvement in livelihood strategies. So climate change has an impact of gender. Gender has an impact on mitigation and adaptation to climate change. It is true everywhere. It is true in Morocco, and of course, it is true in Vietnam as well. I finish on that slide. What you see here, it's not trees. It is two women, I would say two ladies, who bring back firewood and cattle field. Thank you very much. So I may take a few questions just before lunch, if you are inspired.
Xin cảm ơn ông. Tôi là một nhà khoa học Phạm Phụ Huynh được đào tạo ở Đức năm 1961 đến 68 và là nhà sáng chế về tuộc binh gió điện từ, khai thác năng lượng gió, năng lượng thủy triều, sóng biển, v.v. Tôi rất cảm ơn ông nói về những cái tác hại về biến đổi khí hậu. Nhưng mà tôi hỏi là cái viện của Pháp và IRD đã có sáng chế phát minh gì đối với chống biến đổi khí hậu? Cái thứ hai là tôi là một nhà sáng chế muốn hợp tác với Pháp về chế tạo hàng loạt những thiết bị khai thác năng lượng gió giá rẻ, năng lượng thủy triều, sóng biển và dòng hải dương, thì hợp tác là như thế nào? Xin hết.
Thank you very much for your question. In fact, the best way to be in contact with RRD is to just get in touch with me. It will be easier. I would say also that RRD is a research institute focusing on academic and scholar researches, so it's not really a development agency, and we don't produce directly invention, but we do research to help people to implement invention. Just to be precise of the role of and the function of the missions of RRD.
Yes, Anna from Uppsala University. Thank you so much for highlighting gender dimensions and their interrelations with climate change. So having done this study in Morocco, do you have any policy suggestions that you could share, and for Vietnam in particular?
I'm very sorry to say no. Why? Because I devoted 20 years of my life in North African countries, and Vietnam is just a new love story for me. And we are just at the beginning. And I think what I can say from the Moroccan experience is that there's a lot of actors acting in that subject. Social society, civil society, government, of course the international COP22 was a very strong momentum in the perspective. In fact, if we want to make sound recommendation, we have to study deeply the subject. Another difficult, what can be done, I mean, in the country, in one specific country. The second thing is that it's very funny what you ask, because it's the question yesterday we had RRD specialists on climate change, and they made a conference, so I took the opportunity to ask them. And they made exactly the same answer as now. From a social sciences perspective, we have to study very locally what goes on. What is the problem? It is a problem of pollution, water, drought, risks, and so on. So the difficulty is to articulate different scales of knowledges. And it requires not only general theoretical perspective, but also field work. And I think it is the direction we maybe will try to go. I mean, implement a few field works on specific location exposed to climate change, analysis of the general players involved in that issue in Vietnam, and maybe next year, if I come back, I will give you some sound information instead of general speaking recommendation.
One more question, please.
Yeah, Neil Powell from Uppsala as well. I'd just like to follow up on Anna's question. I don't want you to get out of the question so easily. I found much of what you were talking about were sexual differences. You weren't talking about the question of gender so much, which I believe has to do with structures and how structures discriminate and make it more or less difficult for men or women to operate and become agents within society. And I think, whilst I agree you need to do field work at a local level, structures often operate beyond the local context. So your example about women not performing as well in a typhoon event because they're not as strong as men is not really a question of gender, it's a question of sex, and that women are not as strong as men. When we come to policy, I mean, I don't think we're going to put all the women to do more sport and build stronger muscles. That's not the question here.
Of course.
The question here is sort of an equity question about women can participate more in the agenda, that their voices are heard and they can have more agency and influence in terms of bringing about changes and responses in terms of climate change. If I was to ask you that question again in terms of policy, I mean, I don't think it matters whether you're in Morocco or Vietnam or in Sweden, in fact. I think we have masculine structures in place, and more generally, globally. And it's not necessarily a question for a country. It's a high-level question, perhaps, when it comes to policy.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. First, it's one of the main misunderstandings we met when we do that study. It was the confusion between sex and gender. I didn't want to go too far in that direction, but what we have to study is the very specific gender relation we met in the country, and it's what we try to do in Morocco. In Morocco, it's a very complex question. It's not only a question of status, of vision, of assigned role. It is connected with even the productive activities of the people, the level of capitalism, the type of capitalism. So the gender dimension is related to labor, it's related to culture. It's a very complex nexus in itself. And what I felt is that before to give, yes, sound recommendation and information, maybe I'm too cautious, I don't know, but I feel the necessity to really go on the field, try to understand all the connection related to gender, and then specifically to go above this only first sexist, I don't know how to say it, approach, and who could be very superficial in terms of recommendation.
Is the final question? Quý vị ai có còn câu hỏi nữa không ạ? Vâng, xin mời đại diện của bên Học viện Chính sách Phát triển. Có lẽ đây là câu hỏi cuối cùng trong buổi tọa đàm buổi sáng hôm nay.
Thank you for your presentation. I consider about the policy integration on the gender approach. As you know, in Vietnam, we have recognized the importance of climate change and also other issues. So we have good policy to integrate the climate change and also gender in the policy, both in national and local level. But you see, it's difficult to operationalize things in the local level because maybe the tools of integrate the gender and climate change in the plan. So I don't know how is your experience or any comment on the tool, and also how government do in the local level or community level to integrate gender and climate change in a detailed plan. Yeah, and that is my question, and also is the quickness of our policy implementation. Yeah, thank you.
Very shortly, what we see in the study is that at the local level, we had to deal a lot with insecurity and extreme events. In fact, reactions or policies are often react to problems. So there was in Morocco, it's one of the problems is of course the warming effect, but it is on the long side. But there's also more and more extreme events, floods. It's very surprising to see floods in the desert. But it is one of the main problem. Last year, people met especially in the mountains. So at the moment, I mean, we had to face, and the policy and also the researchers had to face on trying to mitigate the risks, to find solution in front of urgent situation. But transforming the gender relation or to make it sensitive at the local level, it's a long way process, and I mean I think it involves not only the researchers but also mainly the association, civil society, and many organizations that work at that level.
Vâng, kính thưa quý vị, giống như ngài Jean-Yves nói rằng là ở Maroc thì chị em thường giàu hơn đàn ông. Tuy nhiên ở Việt Nam chúng tôi thì hình như là đàn ông thường lại nghèo hơn phụ nữ, đúng không ạ? Bởi vì chúng tôi thường xuyên phải báo cáo tình trạng tài chính cho chị em. Vì nếu như một tháng nào đó mà báo cáo muộn thì chắc là chúng tôi phải đi tìm chung ngủ khác. Vâng, kính thưa quý vị, như vậy là các cái thông điệp của các diễn giả đưa ra trong buổi sáng hôm nay chúng tôi nghe được rất là thú vị, đến từ nhiều góc độ khác nhau, từ vấn đề giáo dục, vấn đề về năng suất lao động. Như vậy thì cái phiên thảo luận của chúng ta buổi sáng ngày hôm nay thì đến đây là kết thúc. Xin quý vị lưu ý là buổi chiều ngày hôm nay thì
chúng ta sẽ có 4 chuyên đề. Chuyên đề thứ nhất là nông nghiệp thông minh và phát triển bền vững sẽ được diễn ra tại phòng 309. Chuyên đề 2, thực hiện chính sách đối phó với biến đổi khí hậu, các ứng dụng nổi bật và hợp tác trong khu vực sẽ diễn ra tại phòng 343. Chuyên đề 3, các giải pháp sáng tạo nhằm đảm bảo bền vững môi trường tại Việt Nam sẽ được diễn ra tại phòng 309. Phiên 4, chuyên đề về cách mạng công nghiệp 4.0 và các tác động đến phát triển kinh tế xã hội sẽ được diễn ra tại phòng 343. Như vậy, phiên buổi chiều ngày hôm nay chúng ta sẽ bắt đầu từ lúc 1 giờ 30 tại 2 phòng, đó là phòng 309 và 343. Quý vị lưu ý là chúng ta sẽ di chuyển ra phía cầu thang máy và ở bên trên tầng họp của chúng ta ngày hôm nay. Và một lần nữa xin chân thành cảm ơn quý vị đã chú ý lắng nghe trong buổi sáng ngày hôm nay. Xin quý vị một tràng pháo tay thật lớn được không ạ? Vâng. Và kính thưa quý vị, thì ban tổ chức có chuẩn bị cho quý vị đại biểu cơm trưa tại phòng 307. Xin quý vị lưu ý là chúng ta cũng di chuyển lên phía trên tầng 3 của hội trường này. Xin cảm ơn quý vị và hẹn gặp lại quý vị vào buổi chiều ngày hôm nay.